Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, participants from across the globe. Welcome to the Global Leadership Coalition's International Young Leaders First Virtual Summit. We have organized this summit in collaboration with the Caribbean Center of Excellence for Sustainable Livelihoods and 1M1B Foundation. The summit is the fruit of 2 years of preparation and input from many of you through your participation in our online focus group discussion on the Global Leadership Coalition's Facebook page, in which over 200 people participated. We thank you for lending your voice to our inquiry. We learned your concern is education as an issue at the national level that is impacting you. We triangulated this with a survey carried out by the United Nations Secretary General through the World We Want, and over 2 million young people, and maybe some of you were among them, resoundingly expressed that their major concern around the national issues that impact them is the topic of education, and in particular education that's preparing them for a future world, a world in which they can work, and a world that is sustainable. So in the preparation for the webinar, we not only took into account the mandate of the Global Leadership Coalition to promote leadership and entrepreneurship and create a new brand of leader who is socially conscious and connected to their communities and entrepreneurial, taking actions that transform their communities. We were also conscious of the context in which this is occurring. A world in which, for the first time, there's the largest number of young people between the ages of 14 and 24. 1.8 billion young people. A world in which 84% of young people in Asia live on less than $2 a day, and in which 60% of young people in Africa live on less than $2 a day. A world in which it is projected that by the year 2030, 60% of urban populations will be young people between the ages of 14 and 24. A world in which young people between the ages of 15 and 24 constitute 40% of the world's unemployed. A world in which our future is challenged. The sustainability of our future is challenged by global warming. So this is our context. And today, over the next 2 days, you will hear from a variety of thought leaders who will talk to us about such issues as the leader, the type of leader that we can be to produce the world that we want. That such issues as experiments in education that produces young people who are able to take new actions in their lives. Thought leader around green jobs and what is there to do so that we can actually be prepared for green jobs. And then technology and how technology can be adapted to accelerate our learning. We are also going to give you the opportunity to build your skills in various areas of leadership. And given our mandate to produce young people who are entrepreneurial, we will showcase 2 entrepreneurial young people who participated in the joint effort of the Global Leadership Coalition and 1M1B Foundation in our entrepreneurship challenges. This is work that is designed by 1M1B Foundation. So let's get started. Matt? Matt?
Yes.
Yeah. So.
You have control over the mouse, Mary.
Okay, great. So our first keynote will be presented by myself and Monica Sharma. Just by way of introduction, I am an international economic and social development specialist. I've worked for many years with the United Nations Development Program, working on programs and projects, particularly in Africa. And today I am the founder and managing director of the Global Leadership Coalition, and really pleased to present this today. Monica Sharma is a trained physician and an epidemiologist, and she's worked with the United Nations for about 22 years, and she's currently engaged worldwide as an international expert and practitioner on leadership development for sustainable and equitable change, working with the United Nations university, management institutions, governments, business, media, and civil society organizations. So today, we are kicking off with youth leaders for the world we want. Peaceful interaction, tolerance, commitment to a sustainable future. So some of the questions as we present this that we would like you to consider is, how do we plan to foster leadership? Look at seeking out. Are we seeking out potential leaders and creating opportunities for their development? Are we being a leader while actively supporting the leadership of others? Are we embracing one's social, professional, and personal profiles and moving flexibly among them as required? Are we championing the human dignity of all? So what we have found is that the game has changed for youth leaders, for business, for people, for communities, and for governments. And our inquiry is, how can we design our programs to ensure peaceful interaction, tolerance, and commitment to a sustainable future? And to quote Albert Einstein, the world we have made as a result of the level of thinking we have done thus far creates problems that we cannot solve at the same level at which we have created them. We shall require a substantially new manner of thinking if humankind is to survive. Now over to you, Monica.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you for the introduction, and thank you to all of you for participating in this very important, vital topic that influences the future of the planet. And Mary Simmons spoke about the skills, the competencies, and the inner capacities that are required to bring the shift that we all want to see. What's been happening so far, it's not that we haven't been in action. We've been in action. But the actions did not connect to produce the synergy and results that we wish to see. In an era of massive technological advances, in an era where we've never been connected with such large numbers before, surely we could have made more progress. And I guess that's the question you're asking. So what's a partial response? So let's take education, since that's what we are talking about. Or let's take entrepreneurship, since that's also what we are talking about. So there are many programs that foster leadership in individuals. I think they are all very valid. However, they do not connect to the space that will actually change the game. After all, education worldwide, whether it is in countries that are not so rich or countries that are rich, education has been a mechanism to favor those who have money and resources, wealth. So education is vital for us to have equitable change. How can we bring the best of education to everyone? That's a second question. So simply developing one's own leadership is a partial response. Not wrong, but just partial. If we were now to look at what can we do to have access, inevitably, access alone is not going to make the shift. It is vital, but it is still a partial response, because along with access and quality is really the engagement for the kind of shift that we want to see. And then there is all the technological advances and the skills that are required to use these technological advantages. And so to us, yes, we need those skills, because without those skills, we cannot participate. We need a mechanism to look at access and quality, because without that, we are not going to reach people. It's going to be elitist, and we need to move beyond that. There is a fabulous report done by Oxfam, and it's called Even It Up. And Even It Up is about bringing together people worldwide, in every country, in every location, that can actually transcend the big divides, the digital divide, the divide in terms of access. So all these partial responses enable us actually to move ahead in the future differently. So what does it enable us to do? There are ways in which we can create synergy and bridges, not summation. Summation is a mere addition of strategies. So it's not just cobbling together different strategies. It's really learning how to design to make a difference, and design in a way that my leadership skills and yours, that everyone's leadership skills are brought to bear. And today we have techniques and methodologies that allow us to do that. The second thing we need to do is to know how to design education programs that will reach everybody, that is able to even it up. And third, do we know how to learn the skills? Do we have opportunities to learn the skills? Do we provide the environment to learn the skills that are required to participate in the future? When we are able to do all of this together, we call it a full spectrum response. And I use the word conscious in front of it because when we are conscious, we are able to create differently. When we are able to create differently, we will produce different results. In fact, it was Einstein, and Mary quoted Einstein right now, who said, the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. So if we need education, quality education for the future, I think that we have a huge opportunity to be able to generate synergy and results, alignment in strategy, such that we build inner capacities for leadership, such that we design our programs to reach people, because we actually do have the resources, provided we use them, and to be able to look at the skills that are required, not just technical skills, but the skills that include the creative space of art, skills by which we are able to learn in different ways, as Howard Gardner would say, the multiple intelligences. So how do we bring all of that to bear for education? Over to you, Mary, for the next thought.
Okay, thank you, Monica. So, just to really summarize what Monica has just said, leadership requires us to see patterns for systems change. And it is us, all of us, who are the pattern makers. We are not only the problem solvers. Okay. Over to you, Monica.
Thank you, Mary. In fact, I love the quotation by John McKay that says, criticize by creating alternatives. People think that policy and pattern change are complex issues. Yes, they are complex, but they are not complicated. And there are ways in which citizens can participate in looking at what's needed, provided we demystify all the tools that are used in the space of looking at the governance challenge. So let's look at the governance challenge of education. It's pretty similar to the governance challenge of health or legal access or access to energy, because there's a pattern of how services are organized that follows similar pathways. So first, unfortunately, there is a lot of institutional inertia. And it's the inertia that creeps in, study after study shows, the inertia that creeps in when we look at the problem and see that it's just too big. We think it's just too big, but it's not. It's possible to generate breakthrough initiatives that actually break this institutional inertia. Too often, we focus on the theoretical dimensions of the different sectors of development, trying to understand the factors. Should we understand those factors? Of course we must. However, understanding doesn't generate responses. Responses are generated from our commitment to make a difference. Responses are generated from our leadership. And so we need to move from just theory and understanding to a space where we engage in action and are willing to build the ship while sailing. Meaning, even if we don't have a perfect response for education today, we jump in and start. Because there's something powerful about engagement and about wanting to make that difference. In large countries, particularly, doesn't matter where it is in the world, whether they are rich countries or not so rich countries, there's a huge disconnect between national and local levels, national and subnational levels. Partly because when we work at scale, we think in a particular way and are unable to embrace the operational strategies that are required to make things work and results produced. This disconnect needs to be looked at so that we are able to respond. Fourth, innovation. We all want innovation, but somehow we are very afraid of new ideas and new ways of doing things. We must create a space within each sector, within education, whether that's in the private domain or in the public domain. We must have innovations that allow access, innovations that build quality, innovations that are able to work on the multiple intelligences that each youth is endowed with. How do we innovate? The next domain in governance that we look at are the human rights responses. We have a battery of human rights tenets, principles we live by, where discrimination is not okay, dignity is vital, where we look at what is fair for everyone. However, when we see reality, we don't see reality without discrimination. We don't have access for all children to have quality education. In fact, whether it's developing countries or those that are called developed countries, access to quality education remains something that those who have money are able to access in most situations. There are exceptions. There are exceptions around the world, and we can learn from them. I believe there are new experiments in Sweden, in Norway, in Denmark, that actually are able to look at quality and access to education right from the start. And then the community voice is not heard, and the ways in which people participate are limited. But in today's world, we cannot make education into a field for experts. It's a field for experts, yes, but it's also a field for people to engage differently, whether that's health, education, legal dimensions. So the governance challenge of education requires us to engage in these factors as we design to make a difference. I'll give you an example, because the governance challenge is really about making policies reality instead of policies as rhetoric. So for me, the policy project continuum is imperative. It's imperative because policies need to get translated into reality. And too often, there are obstacles that don't allow us to do so. I will quote an example of the policy project continuum such that we can create sustainability. Sustainability for us has 5 factors. It has, for any initiative to be sustainable, it needs to be technologically sustainable. There needs to be capacity to work on that technology. So we need to build capacity. That's second. It needs to be financially sustainable. It needs to be managerially sustainable. It needs to be ecologically sustainable. Whether it's a school or a college or a workplace or a business entrepreneurial initiative, it needs to be ecologically sustainable. To these 5, I add a 6th, and I say for true sustainability, for equity to be present on the planet, which actually is abundant, we need to have the sustainability and equity that emanates out of people and their values, people and their leadership. So sustainability requires us to have a new kind of leadership that's willing to create alternatives. And so I was giving an example, and I wanted to give an example out of industry. And this is a particular mine in Africa. And there was a CEO, since we're talking about entrepreneurial spirit, a CEO that actually created change. It turned around the company from loss to profit. But it didn't do so just focusing on the finances. It did so by totally investing in people and their leadership. All staff and managers use transformational approaches. All the players, the stakeholders, governing board, trade union, shareholder, stakeholder, were exposed to a leadership program. Innovations were encouraged as different from the challenge that we spoke about, and they were acknowledged. Breakthrough initiatives within the company with employees using generative methods was actually one of the major ways in which safety was put into the mines. New pathways were put in place to address systems issues. Safety is one of the most important things in extraction industry. And beyond just the people, planet, and profit triple bottom line, there was an urgency for positive action and challenging these areas within the staff, the managers. Most of the time, PR for companies is done partly through community service. But this group decided not to use community service for PR of the company. They used community service to build partnership, to create a new society as an opportunity for one's own growth and one's contribution. I think that's vital. Leadership development for community members, not just the staff, was another dimension of this work. So for me, what is emerging in different places is an acknowledgement of the inner capacity of people in different sectors. And so, Mary, I will hand it over to you again for us to conclude.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, so thank you very much for that, Monica. And so, in conclusion, what we want to say is that the future is not some place we are going to, but one we are creating. And that we is all of us. The paths to it are not found, but made. And the activity of making them changes both the maker and the destination. And this is a quote from Peter Elliott. Thank you, and we look forward to your active participation and generating from these thoughts that we have been able to share with you. And now we'd like to open up the floor to have any contributions, comments, or questions that people would like to submit. Thank you.
And maybe just to clarify that we will close at 7 because I need to go. And that was the time.
Okay. Okay, great. So what questions do we have? Comments, contributions? Yeah, so as we embark and have this contribution to the thinking around what is necessary, especially from a leadership perspective, to address the changes that we would like to see, we have actually given some suggestions, but the core of this is really taking action, looking at what is required and looking for new ways of doing things, and also engaging communities. Yeah. Engaging communities in the process of addressing the problem so that we are not taking actions that we've taken before, but being innovative. And all of this is urgent. Urgent because of the state of the world today, where we have gross inequalities, where we have a youth bulge, where we have inequalities within urban areas, where youth are being marginalized, and where that energy is not being harnessed to find creative solutions to the challenges that we are experiencing today. If there are hold on, do we have some questions? Yeah, okay, so, if there are no questions or comments, then we will get ready to move into the next segment, and we have Manav, Akshita, and Janice on, and we'll be moving to the next segment, which is on entrepreneurship. Thank you so much, Monica, and really, really appreciate your generosity in contributing to the discussion and stimulating thoughts on actions that we can take to strengthen our leaders, encourage leadership, encourage innovation. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, bye.
Are we setting up for the next session? Yeah. Actually, All right, so in this next session,
Hi, Mary. I'm here. Madam.
hi, welcome, Anna. In this next session, we are going to present young entrepreneurs from the Caribbean and India, and we will also have some brief remarks by Manav Subodh, who is the co-founder of 1M1B Foundation, and Manav is also a senior fellow at UC Berkeley and an advisor and a director at Ernst& Young. He has over 17 years of experience in consulting on corporate affairs, government affairs, education, marketing, branding, and business development with such organizations as Ernst & Young, Intel, Hughes, and QAI. As I said, he's the co-founder of A Million for a Billion, which is a global initiative to scale 1 million youth and women to create jobs for 1 million people. And the Global Leadership Coalition has partnered with Manav in carrying out an entrepreneurship challenge in the Caribbean, the 2015 challenge in the Caribbean, and also engaging them in the Change the World internships. And I want to call on him now to give us a few remarks and also then introduce the winners of the Entrepreneurship Challenge in the Caribbean and also the winners of the Change the World internship in India. So Manav, over to you, and thank you so much for the partnership and also for what you are doing. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Mary. And I hear a noise. If you can mute. Okay, looks fine. No, I still hear the loop. Can I start?
Is that better? Yes.
No, I hear my voice again, so it's like an echo.
Manav, we can hear you, so you can start talking.
Okay. I still hear the echo, but I'll just carry on. So firstly, thank you very much for inviting me and this opportunity to talk at the Global Leadership First virtual summit. And we are really excited about this partnership with the Global Leadership Coalition. And what I want to introduce to you are two star entrepreneurs and two of their businesses who have done exceedingly well and who were showcased at the United Nations just a month back. And they presented to a physical audience at the UN headquarters, and they were an exemplary example of what entrepreneurship can mean in this new context that we are talking about under 1M1B. So before I dive in, I do inviting these entrepreneurs to present. Let me give you a quick overview about what 1M1B is. So 1M1B basically started with a question that how can a million young people, specifically youth and women, create a billion jobs? So a million for a billion. And can these women and youth create businesses which solves big challenges that our world is confronted with? And can these young people and women move out of conversations that somebody needs to do something with me? Can these people own their own destiny? And can entrepreneurship be a manifestation of what leadership can look like for young people? And can that be a voice for young people and their leadership and what they want in this new world? They're going to inherit a world, which would be given by us, and they're going to take it forward. And today the world is faced with a number of challenges: food, agriculture, sustainability, issues related to youth, women, and so many of these factors that are the world is challenged with. And we look at the government or the civil society to solve these challenges. Instead of that, the question that the Global Leadership Coalition and 1M1B embarked on was, what if we give the charge to the young people and let them come up with solutions that make sense to them, that is an expression of them, and which also solves these big challenges in a very sustainable way. And second level, in a profitable way, so that the sustainability comes in. We all talk about sustainability, we all talk about leadership, we all talk about solving challenges, but what would it look like to get that all done? And with that question, we really embarked into the program, which is what these young people are going to show to you. So, a big background about myself, I've been doing a lot of work on the high-tech, high-growth entrepreneurship space for the last 10 years. And one of the things that we wanted to sort of go after is, what does small look like? Does it have to be all about scalable, fundable startups? Does it all have to be the VC style startup? Does it all has to be like the Silicon Valley style startups? Can entrepreneurship be be lot more than that? Can entrepreneurship be a voice to people? Can entrepreneurship be an expression of people? Can that be a manifestation of their leadership? And that's what we really wanted to explore and give the opportunity to young people who have not thought about entrepreneurship in this way. So that was the idea. So what we did really was we launched a pilot program in 3 regions. We launched it in New York, we launched it in the Caribbean, and we launched it in India. And all these 3 were with a different purpose. And let me take you through that purpose. So, and they were around 3 operating principles that we really wanted to go after. One is, can entrepreneurship be open source ideas? Can it be copy me please ventures? Can it be, I'm going to share it? Can it be social franchising? Can it be let's work on a solution, and can it be rapidly deployed and scale all across the country with nobody getting bothered about who has the IP, whose venture it is? Can it just be for good? And can that be portable? Can it be instantly activated in regions who need it and constantly done it and connected with people who have done this all across the country? So can a venture in India be the same a venture in Africa? Can that be same in Caribbean? And can all these people be connected because they are all solving the same problem with the same venture? So we wanted to explore open source ideas without the closed, IP kind of an ideas, open source sustainable entrepreneurship. And we did that in India. So that is an example of what is going to be presented by the team Basta, Akshita and Malvika there. They're going to be talking about this huge open source idea they came up with, which is now ready for scale. And in fact, one of our speakers later in the day, Mo Hassan, who's from Earthopia, and we are sort of partnering with him. How can we really scale this all across India? Through not just in few villages, but maybe hundreds of villages. So this organization, Team Basta, tried this out in one area of India. It works, and it worked really well. And you're going to hear about it. And then now it's ready to scale, and we are already scaling it and having that discussion. The second principle, so one is open source idea. Second is, can entrepreneurship be about, not just scale fast, but fail fast? Can it be that so that we don't waste people's time? Can it be around women leadership? Can it be around women entrepreneurship? Can it be around sustainability as a topic? And that's what we explored in the Caribbean. And we have Janice, who's going to present to you her venture, which is really in the scalable entrepreneurship part, where she went through the process, she pivoted, and has now a big business that is ready to scale in the Caribbean. And it's not in the Caribbean, it could be scaled anywhere in the world. So she's going to talk about the scalable ventures that she has come up. And she went through this process, which is like the scale fast, fail fast. And she went through this test of fire that we're going to talk about. And then sort of here is another venture that is ready for scale and scale all across, not just in Caribbean, but all across the world. Third is what we wanted to explore was, we all talk about big, but can small be the new big? So can there be like small initiatives that people take in their community, which is an expression of themselves and of a world that they want? So we piloted this program also in New York, where young people who are from the underserved areas found their ventures and created ventures which was an expression of themselves and who they wanted to be and have a voice and be heard in their community. So that's another example that we had. So we had open source ideas in India, fail fast, scale fast in Caribbean, and the small, and this is the new big in New York. And what we're going to showcase to you is two of those ventures, which is the India and the Caribbean one. And we ran an accelerator process, which lasted for 3 to 4 months. The teams went through the rigor, Global Leadership Coalition 1-on-1. We conducted the workshop. We ran a WebEx session. And we, of course, had fallouts, which is part of the entrepreneurial process, fail fast. But we have these people who are emerging winners and now are ready to scale their businesses all across the world. So without taking any more time, let me present to you the first venture, which is in the category of open source idea / portable entrepreneurship, Team Basta. You know, three young ladies. Again, a great example of women entrepreneurship and people, women who want to solve a big challenge of women employment in rural areas. And they're going to talk about, so Akshita Singla and Malvika Verma, they're going to talk about this venture. And Apurva Sharma is the third co-partner who's not presenting today, but Akshita and Malvika would be presenting what they have done and what Basta is as expression of themselves and what they want in their community. So Akshita and Malvika, if you can take it up from here.
Okay, thank you so much. So, hi everybody. We like to present Basta. It's a venture which has been started by Akshata, Malvika, and Apurva. Unfortunately, Malvika's mic is not working, so she won't be able to present. So, there were a lot of things which motivated us to take up this venture, but the major thing which drove us was that we wanted to take entrepreneurship to the masses, especially the women. There were a lot of discussions which went around, but there weren't any women entrepreneurs or there weren't any discussion regarding women entrepreneurs. So we wanted to bring this topic to the masses and make people familiar with the concept. So what do? We create recyclable, we refashion bags and make them out of waste materials. And we're getting it done by a group of 5 women in a village in India. Next slide, please. Slide. So how do we, am I audible? Yep, thank you. So how do we do it? So firstly, we procure the raw materials, which we transport to the women in the village, where these women, the rural women, design and stitch these bags, and then they transport it to Delhi, where we are currently based out, and then we sell these bags in Delhi itself, and whatever the revenue we generate from selling of these bags is given back to the women so that they can earn a living which they weren't doing earlier. Next slide. Slide. Yeah, thank you. So basically, this is a replicable model. So we want to involve more and more youth into this, and we plan to do it by calling it Basta in a box. So we plan to encourage more youth to come forward and take this up. So we'll call the people who come share out of the profits we generate. So this way we're getting the youth to come forward and take entrepreneurship easily and get a taste of what we're trying to do. Next slide. Slide. So by this model till now we've been able to create 5 women financially independent. So these women were skilled, but they were unemployed earlier. But now with our venture, they're financially independent and they earn a living on their own. So this is the impact we've been able to create till now. But we want to take this forward and scale it up and make these 5 women into 50,000 women and scale it across 100 villages in India. And for this, we need roughly around $1 million in a year to scale up. So this is what we've done till now, and we want to scale it up and take it to a lot of villages and make more women financially independent in the villages of India and take it all over the world after that. Thank you.
we'll just open it up for any questions. And I would like to give a few comments about Basta, but I'll just hold on if there are any questions or comments. Okay, so let me make a few comments. So this is an expression of women leadership and women entrepreneurship in action. Women solving women issues and women solving women problems. And we all talk about, women breaking the glass ceiling. We all talk about how financial independence can affect women. But here is a team of three young girls who've chosen to take action and show their leadership through their ventures, which is Vasta. And what is really good about Vasta is that you can copy it. So they're creating now a brand so that they can invest in the brand, and the brand could be taken across various places across India and across the globe potentially. And the main purpose that they are wedded is not profitability. Of course, they look at profit, but what they want is 50,000 women employed and financially independent. And you can imagine what that can do. They demonstrated 5 women financially independent through this model, which lasted they tested it out in 4 to 5 months kind of a time frame. And now they're ready to scale. So they've done the litmus test, they've gone through the test of fire, they know this model works, and they're ready to scale. And this is what social franchising and portable entrepreneurship is all about. That's what open source entrepreneurship and sustainable entrepreneurship is all about. And that's what these 3 young ladies demonstrate to us. So thanks Akshita and Malvika, and of course they need, I was talking to them day before yesterday. They need about $100,000 to go to the next level, and in a year's time they're looking at $1 million dollars to really scale this up, and that's what they're talking about. And I think they've got fantastic market validation, and of course partners. Now they're ready to take it up. So let's get into the next one, which is Janice. And Janice has a great model. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, before we move on, I have a question. So I would like to hear a little bit more about the scale up. And so I'm really encouraged by the plan to really carry this across India. And so I'd like a few more comments on the how and how what the plan is for bringing this to scale. Thank you.
Sure. So I would let Malvika and Akshita talk about it. Akshita, would you like to take that?
Yes, sir. So currently, the 5 women we're working with, they have the basic stitching skills and basic machinery, but to stitch these bags, they require a certain amount of techniques and certain amount of machinery, and so we need for scale up. Firstly, we need some trainers to train them properly so that the efficiency and the productivity improves. And then we require certain kind of machinery which is made for these kind of bags to scale it up and to take it across villages. Since these had the skills, so we didn't have to really go down and teach them the skills. But since we're planning it to increase it to 50,000 women, so we will be requiring people who can come and train them and teach them the skill. And of course, then we require the machinery so that it improves the efficiency. Thank you.
Mary, did that answer your question?
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, actually, I have a follow-up. So how are they reaching out for the trainers?
Okay, so currently,
Akshita, go on.
Currently we trying to partner with people who can help us give us trainers, and so that we can reach out to these women, because in the village itself there are a lot of women who are willing to take up this, but then they don't have the skills. So and one woman in the village itself has the proper skills, so we're contacting her so that she can go out to the other villages, have the funds, so that we have the funds, we can tell her to go out to the other villages and train the other women.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. And congratulations. I'm inspired to hear about your plans to bring this to scale by engaging in partnership and also in further fundraising. And I also want to acknowledge the impact that you've been able to make in the pilot project that you did.
Thank you.
I would like to add an additional comment on it. So there are a lot of young people I meet in universities who are fascinated by entrepreneurship, but they have other career plans. They have other higher education plan, which is perfectly okay. Now, here is an opportunity for young people, and what Akshita and her team are doing is also tap into the entrepreneurial talent of people. Now, there's a difference between being an entrepreneur and being entrepreneurial. And Akshita, Malvika, and Apurva have chosen to convert their entrepreneurial skills and also be an entrepreneur. But there are a lot of young people who are entrepreneurial, but they have other avenues and other things they're looking at. What Team Basta is doing is giving opportunity for young people in their college to take a model and say create 5 women as independent, 5 financially independent women in 6 months or 3 months. And I think that's the real power of this model, that it could be taken in a box and using the power of young people and their leadership, it could be implemented in different regions. So they are using the student power and in their community, it's a student-run business, it's a college business, and their Team Basta is owned by the 3 ladies there. But it's more like a college-run business, and they're utilizing internship opportunities, giving internship opportunities to a lot of young people, their colleagues, who are then given an opportunity to do create 5 women entrepreneurs or 5 financially independent women, like in 3 to 6 months. And for me, that is really high, and that's a really high impact, because that gives an opportunity for both sides of the pyramid to participate with each other. And that's what this is an example of.
Thank you. So this actually speaks to some of this question that we've been engaging in terms of how is education actually contributing to the demand for creating young people who are entrepreneurial. And so what I'm hearing from this is this model gives that opportunity. The model of using as an internship actually creates an opportunity not only to impact society, but to further develop the entrepreneurial skills of young people who are in an educational setting. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. So thanks, Team Basta. Let's move on to the next one, Janice, who has an exceptional venture, and I'll let her take you through that journey and what she's up to.
Okay, Mr. Deal.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
This is Sandy. Who I can never.
Yes, Janice, we can hear you.
Awesome.
So we have someone speaking. Can you please go on mute?
Looking relaxed. You're looking more relaxed than the last time I saw you.
Hello, is that better?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so my name is Janice McLeod, and I'm from Team Agro Central. And by this lovely picture, you can see this is the motivation from why we created our platform. Okay, I'm kind of getting an echo. So yeah, we basically created our platform because there was a disconnect in the market. My grandparents had a farm, but what usually happened is that they were unable to communicate effectively with the people who would buy it. So if they were buying it, there was always an issue. They would be getting a proper price, and if there was somebody coming to buy it, it just really and truly made no sense. So my co-founders and I, Jermaine and Philip, we all come from farming backgrounds, and we decided to do something about this solidly. So what we did is created AgroCentral, and AgroCentral is a supply relationship management software which basically helps agribusinesses to effectively manage their suppliers using web, email, and SMS services. So what exactly does AgroCentral do? So we allow businesses to communicate orders to suppliers. You can manage and rate your suppliers and track suppliers and billing metrics. So we allow businesses to communicate their orders and supply delivery schedules by SMS, email, and voice services. Farmers can supply and confirm orders, and buyers can track and view their reports. So what does the local market look like in Jamaica? We have over 171,000 registered farmers. There is 122% mobile penetration rate. There are over 5,000 restaurants and 250 hotels. But on a global scale, no one in the world eats or can exist without agriculture. So what have we been up to? So you know that we did come second in this competition. Thank you to the Global Leadership Coalition. We've also entered the World Bank Investment Readiness Competition in the Caribbean, which we won. We've been selected to showcase at the Fin4Ag conference in Nairobi, Kenya. We also won the pitch competition for ATEC. And that's a repeat of the other side is a repeat. And so I want to share with you our vision. Our vision is to create a world where farmers and businesses connect seamlessly to nourish the world. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. So we are opening up the floor now for questions. Manav, over to you.
Yes, so I'll just wait for some questions, and of course I have comments from Janice.
Which parish?
So for me,
Okay,
just
somebody's asking which parish Janice is originally
yes,
from.
yes.
Janice?
I'm here.
Yeah, somebody's asking what parish you're from.
I'm from St. Catherine.
And Janice, I have a question for you because I know that you have been engaging with several farmers during the course of this project, and you had a plan to scale up your engagement. I would like you to comment on that.
So as it currently stands, we have an initial 25 farmers. We went to California for the past month. We've been working to get in contact with a further 200 farmers. We are in talks with a major agro-processor in Jamaica that currently manages over 200 farmers. So I'm thinking before the year ends, we should have about 450 farmers on our platform.
Thank you. And can you talk about your vision for the future?
Well, our vision for the future is to create, pardon?
In terms of further scale up.
Yes, so what we hope to do is to create a world where farmers are encouraged to produce, because a lot of small farmers have been coming out of agriculture. So we want to encourage them to produce so that we can nourish the world with real food being grown by real people. So that's our main vision, to create a world where the entire world is nourished and we don't waste food, because we can effectively communicate our needs and wants in real time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah, there's another question. How do you do payments and orders between the two groups?
Okay, so what we have is we've developed our own messaging system and platform. So all the messages come through our platform currently, and then they're sent out. So we use a bunch of web services. I am not the programmer, so I couldn't go in detail and in depth to answer that. But in terms of payments, we have not been handling payments because we are a startup company and we would need more financing to be able to handle that aspect of the transaction.
Thank you. Are there any more questions?
Definitely.
Okay, this other question says, is this only in Jamaica so far? And do you intend to take it regionally?
Currently, we're in Jamaica. We have started to go into California. We did some work there over the past month. So it's not only regionally, we intend to make this a global thing.
Thank you. And then lastly, the last question was, how do businesses pay for the foods, and how do you pay the farmers? What sort of financing logistics do you use?
Okay, so what we envision in the completed model is to basically to be able to manage and handle payments, orders, everything at once. So as it stands, we don't have the capacity because we don't have the financing. So what we've been doing currently is to just work with people who have existing suppliers or existing farmers and basically help them to manage that interaction.
Well, thank you very much, Janice, and thank you to Akshita and also to Manav. This was a great session. We're running a little bit behind now, and so we're going to move on. And so we invite people who still have questions to submit their questions, and we will forward them to the presenters and have them answered, and we'll be able to send them back. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, hello everyone. This is Kristen Ellington, and I'm here today to present the skill building section of our program. I'm really excited. We've got 3 fantastic presentations for you. And the idea behind the skill builders is, now that you're all inspired by hearing about this incredible work that's been done already, is to get you to understand some practical on-the-ground skills that are necessary for you to also be successful in your entrepreneurial endeavors. So we're going to kick off today with a really interesting conversation around self-esteem. This is the key, and this is where all business starts. This first session will be presented by Rick Smith, and he's going to help you uncover who you view yourself to be and how you project yourself out into the world. So all participants and listeners will discover keys in identifying how they currently view themselves, and then also have the ability to awaken themselves to be a better, stronger, more powerful entrepreneur out there in the world. So issues that you can be considering, thinking about, examining include whether you know why you're here and what your purpose is, whether you treat yourself right, take care of yourself when it comes to things you don't do so well, perhaps things you think you see yourself as a failure at, thinking about past mistakes, past hurts, and really just the ability to get you to see past that and to know what it is that you personally are really good at in the world and where you can add value to make a huge difference. So before Rick starts, I want to give you a little background on who he is. Rick is an amazing motivational speaker. He's also dubbed a growth facilitator. He has this fantastic way of merging humor and insights into everyday life skills and has a deep expertise in technology, health, nutrition. So bringing all of these skills together, Rick has incredible insight into how you can become this powerful person that you are today. So Rick, I'd like to pass the baton over to you and have you get started and let us know how we can become powerful entrepreneurs.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me. First off, Janice being Jamaican, selfishly, that was awesome. That was just awesome. And the prior, that was just amazing. I am sitting here in awe of the youth and what they're doing. So that's very inspiring. All right, so I'm going to get right into the talk. There's an echo and I don't know how to fix it, so I'm sorry. But anyway, first things first. Self-esteem. I'm going to ask you to move the slides because I can't move it. All right, so it says who you view yourself as and you project yourself to your world. The number one thing that if you take away from today is you have to be the boss of you. It's that inner boss that takes over. If it doesn't, then you will always be at the whims of the external environment. There are many, many resources that I'm going to reference, and at the end of this conversation, I will gather some notes to point you to Victor, Hugo, and a few other amazing references that I've gathered this information from. But at the end of the day, you have to be the boss. And that boss has a lot of dialogue in your mind. And that dialogue, that self-dialogue, is when you're dealing with your own failings or your own accomplishments, or when you're dealing with failings and accomplishments with others, or even conflict, especially conflict. So this piece also defines the interaction. And whenever I'm dealing with this, I think, how am I going to affect the person that I'm dealing with in the better? In the past, when I wasn't understanding this field very, very well, I would think, I have to win this argument, I have to win this battle, I must win. And whether I won the moment or not, I didn't bond anything with that person. So if I outsmarted them or proved my point, there was nothing that was more edifying. The person, either they lost and it was out, or I lost and I was out. I created a combative environment. And when I understood self-esteem better, then I'm able to create a win-win environment, a collaborative. So even if I don't agree with the other person, I can then empathize, understand, and acknowledge them. And in that space, there's a bond because they know I understand them. Next slide, please. All right, so this is one of the most important things, and I love this phrase by Mark Twain, this quote: the two most important days of your life is the day you were born and the day you find out why you're here. And it's understanding your purpose for all of the reasons why you are born, where you're born, with your limitations and gifts. And when you can step outside of that space and understand it, you're going to do some things. All right, so then the question becomes, how do we do that? How do we simply go from just being here to being very clear about why you're here? All right, next slide. And I like visuals because I'm a visual person, so I just think when you're being here, you're a silhouette of yourself. You're almost going to do something, but you're not sure. Versus, next slide, when you're clear, you walk with presence, you talk with presence, your entire physical structure changes. Now I can say this because being a motivational speaker has been very good for me to watch people, but then also on the personal training side, when I help somebody adjust their physical mechanics, there is an interoperational thing that happens when you see yourself, you feel better about that version, then that version becomes better and it plays on itself. And this all kind of works together when you learn how and why you're here. So to get there, you need to ask some questions. Next slide. The first question is, ask your loved ones what they know you to be good at. And this is important because if you are like I was, and still am at times, not too sure of why I'm here, if people like me, then those who love you will tell you, hey, you're really good at that. You're really good at that. And then you'll get that reminder in yourself. But bar none, the best thing I've ever done was this next tip. Take the test at personalitypage.com. Now, I called the company and said, well, there'll be people all over the globe coming in to take this test. It's $5 on the American scale. And so if you're able to take this test, I highly encourage you to do this. I was introduced to this when I became a manager here at Brown, and they used it as a managing building skill. And since that point, I've used this for over a decade. Love the way this test gives you insight into yourself. And that insight is my next phrase. You can't see the picture when you're inside the frame. And that means it's very hard to audit yourself, and it's very hard to see what you're struggling with, or even know when to reel back or to step forward. And this testing will help you do that. It'll help you step outside of yourself so you can look and go, oh, these are the characteristics that I really like about me, and I want to keep nourishing them. And these are other characteristics that I really dislike. They're not good, and I want to diminish them. So asking the right questions of people around you, taking this test, I think it's one of the best investments you could do for yourself. And it's also, as I've encouraged others to look into these self-assessment tests, it's the cheapest I've seen. So you're going to get the best return for the least investment, and I'm a fan of that. All right, so what are some key things that will stop you from asking the right questions? All right, so we're going to go to the next slide and address some of these keys. I call them the showstoppers. The first one is your ego. You really have to get that in check. That's that piece that you do not want to hear anyone tell you your flaws. And it's silly because we're all flawed. So you should invite this. So how I combat my evil, I make it a habit. Whether I'm training my clients or I'm talking to my son or talking to my wife, I ask them, what can I do better? Or if there was an interaction that went south, I'll ask them, what did I do that you did not like? How can I fix it? That takes an incredible amount of ego checking. I'm Jamaican by birth, and so my parents never asked us what we thought of their actions. It was, why do me tell you, and go on a be, right? Nothing was ever engaged from that space of asking for a child to tell an adult, how dare you? But I think that's a dangerous space, not just for a parent, but everyone. So the ego checking is one of the most important pieces, because if you are not able with your peers, with your loved ones, to have them tell you things that you need to work on, then you're always going to have a blind spot or several. And this will never pull your character together. Furthermore, it creates a sense of guilt and burning questions because you know stuff is off by your interactions at times if you just watch. But if you're afraid of dealing with your ego, then you won't ask. You won't ask the person, hey, yesterday when I said that thing to you, you kind of stepped back a little bit. Did I hurt your feelings? These are very vulnerable spaces to get to, and it's a challenge. So that's the first one. Deal with the ego and asking others. The second one is not trusting yourself. This is almost inverse, but I deliberately put it as your second because you don't want to over-trust yourself and not invite others in. But it's vitally important that you practice trusting your instincts. You've been given them for a reason. So the way I tell students is if you're walking by a particular class and you like it, it's a sewing class, but you're with your friends and they go, man, sewing's for softies. And in your mind you were excited until they said that, but then you kind of squelched it. Don't do that. Honor that thing in your system. You've been given it for a reason. So you have to learn how to trust your gut. I heard it said, there will never be a book written about, I listened to my gut and I was wrong. It's always, I felt something and I did not act on it. That is always what most people say, not the other. So always learn how to trust your gut. The third one is what I call stinking thinking. This one is your inner critic. And this critic, if you can visualize, they're always far away on a pedestal with a long, crotchety finger. And they say stuff like, yeah, I didn't like the way you said that. And another thing, I didn't like your dress. And I don't like your shoes. And you're kind of fat today. And there's just a constant critic, the inner critic. You have to learn how to silence that critic. And again, some of the books I will refer to you are give you more inner tools. This is just an overview. But this is an essential one. The fourth is improper nutrition. When Janice said real people making real food, cannot overstate the significance of her purposeness, because I deal with clients that have been eating wrong foods and now their body is making them pay, and pay dearly. They can't go to work, they can't make a living, and they're now suicidal. So this is important, that if you say to yourself, well, I can't afford to buy at that store, go to a farmer, do something, but get real food. In America, the temptation is we're going to go to the cheaper stores because stores like Whole Foods, we dub it whole paycheck. If I go to Whole Foods, I can't eat for the month, but I need food for the month. My money's limited. So I advise my clients to look, you have to find creative ways. I'm not in your space. I live over here, you live over there. But you must find your way to get real food, because if you don't, it'll affect the way you think, it'll affect the way you see life, and it'll affect the way you do life. And at another time, if I ever get a chance to tell you all of my medical issues, I'm speaking from first person. I've had 7 major surgeries, 7 years of 10 major surgeries, and several of them were death and returning and death and returning. So I can tell you firsthand, you really need to pay attention to nutrition. And the final one, the showstopper, is a distorted moral compass. If you take on all of these skill builders and your agenda is not to better yourself, your fellow human, but to use it as a tool of manipulation, then this will not work out for anyone who is around you. They call this the dark triad. And the dark triad is it's a difficult thing to really describe in all this moment. I'll send more documentation. But for me, how I stay away from this distorted moral compass is I'm a Bible guy. I'm a church-going man. So that's where I get my moral guide. And also, as you see other people that I'm inspired by and they live that life, then I also use them as physical guides to how to live this thing. Next slide, please. Okay, so now comes some exciting steps you can take. You know what to avoid. Now there are things that you should do. I call it your on switch. You get to choose how to embrace your life's circumstances. The example was taken from a book by Selinger, and he wrote, it's called Leading Optimism. Reference will be provided. But in this book, he described two very similar types of people. One group is brought into a room and they're told, this is a test of concentration. And there's a loud blaring noise coming through the speaker. Do your best, take the test, and the results will be posted. And so they do that. That's group one. Group two is put into the similar room, everything the same, and they're told the exact same thing. This is a test of concentration. Do your best. There's loud blaring noise. However, group two has a switch on the table, and they could press a button on the table. And they're told, if you so choose, you can press that button, and it'll stop the noise for a minute. If you press it twice, it'll stop the noise altogether. Do your best. Now, this test has been run over and over again, and consistently, group two performs 500 times better than group one. And so the question is, how many times did group two press that button? And the answer is 0. They never pressed the button. But the fact that they knew they had choice and they could press the button, it turned off their fight or flight, and they could focus and they could really employ all of their energies. So my encouragement to you in this one is, you need to realize in all of your life circumstances, you always have choice. Even if it's just to have a good attitude about the circumstance that is so out of your control, you control that piece. And on a daily basis, you'll have time where you can choose and celebrate the glorious times. But the most important piece is when you lose something, you totally failed, you try this entrepreneurship and you've stunk it up, then you can choose in that moment to embrace. The hazard, what you're going to do is avoid blaming, well, they didn't get me enough money and my partner was a bum and all that stuff. If you step into that space, you relinquish your power, because all of those things are outside of you and had nothing to do with you. But if you embrace it by saying, well, what was my role in this loss and what can I do to make it better the next time? Now you've taken on your true self and your power is on. Next, navigate with purpose. As you know yourself and what you're good at, after you've taken that test and you've asked your friends and you've asked your loved one, then your goal is, in everyday activity, you see where you can add value. This practice of adding value in everything you do will ensure your self-esteem. Because we all have, since we're people and mammals are designed to congregate, and we're designed to want to be around other people. But no one wants to be around that person's always taking. They want to be around people where they get to take and give. So if you make it your creed that everywhere I go, I'm going to add value, then you step into that space where you're really building your self-esteem. Next slide. Okay. So this one is a phrase that my 9-year-old son and I came up with, because we've been working on giving him something simple so he can remember how to just go through his daily events. And this just became a great phrase. I love it, and so I use it all the time. So as you work on your self-esteem continuum, use this phrase, and it can help you align, because it brings both your internal compass and your external responsibility. So I wrote it down in 2 statements, 2 segments. Be excellent. And I said, this is your job. This is your piece of the value added to the world that you've been put in. Do everything you do very well. Don't try to be the best. Just try to be your best. Learn how to continue improving and never stop learning. I am constantly reading, constantly learning. Love this guy's phrase. To exist is to change. To change is to mature. And to mature is to go on creating oneself endlessly. So if you make this your job, then you're never going to be at the same spot. And that's not all. Your best will keep you from condemnation of that inner critic that I spoke about earlier. Once you do your best, then you can shut down that finger-pointing critic, and you can say, I did my best, and you can leave it alone. So be excellent in everything. And then the second part is so vitally important. This is your job to your surroundings, to act thoughtfully. No one has ever said when they work with a jerk that, hey, you know what? I love this guy because although he's really good at what he does, he's a jerk. Now, you'll never get anyone stating that. They'll just simply remember you were a jerk. And that's all they'll talk about. That's all you talk about when you've interacted with someone that's been totally sliding of your humanity. So, as I wrote down at the end, no one will ever say about you, yes, he's the biggest jerk around here for sure, but he's from Harvard, as we say in New England. So doesn't that make it better? Yeah, no one will ever say that. So, from your family, co-workers, classmates, people in passing, always add value when you act thoughtfully. Whether it's a simple smile, it's a simple good morning. Be excellent, act thoughtfully. It's easy to remember. Just stick to the beat. Be excellent, act thoughtfully. Next slide, please. All right. So at the very end, I'm going to write that down and go to that page. You can do a quick survey. But I want to open it up to, I hit you with a bunch of things, and I want to open it up to some questions.
So, Rick, I just want to step in here for a moment. Thank you so much. That was really inspirational and exciting. You gave so many great ideas for everyone. What we're going to do is we're actually hold questions till the end because we're running a little behind today. So we'll take a couple skill builder questions at the end. But thank you so much. I'm sure that was an incredible inspiration to everybody. What I'd like to do is introduce our next presenter, Marcia Chambers. So Marcia is the CEO of MC29 Consultants, and she is also a contributing member of AWE, which stands for Aspiring Women's Entrepreneurs Summit. I'm really excited to hear more from her. With a background in inspirational speaking and a focus on relationships and leadership, Marcia has been an award-winning leader within the Toastmaster community, which is a fantastic community that really teaches people how to present powerfully, to speak powerfully, and to influence people, which is a really important skill when you're going to be an entrepreneur. She's also a founding member of a chapter dedicated to entrepreneurs, and she has all sorts of other really amazing things that she wants to share with you. So in order to jump right into that, I'm going to go ahead and hand over the mic. Marcia, are you ready to get started? All right. We are having a little technical difficulty with Marcia, so what we're going to do is we're going to skip right on to the next session while we find out how to get her back online. And
I'm here.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Marcia.
I think I had muted myself and forgot to unmute.
No problem.
Thank you so much, Denise. Thanks for that wonderful introduction, and thank you to Global Leadership Coalition for gifting me the opportunity this morning to speak with you. Today, you will walk away with 3 key ingredients for a winning presentation. I've coined them CCC. Now, what does that mean? CCC are confidence, connection, and the close. Am I in control of this slide?
Hold on just a sec. We're going to try to give you control.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you should be able to control it.
Okay, thank you so much. As I mentioned, the CCC is coined by me to mean confidence, connection, and the close. Now, what I'd like for you to do is to take a piece of paper and a pen and write 3 words that are used to describe you. Something that you would like to overhear in a conversation, someone speaking about you. 3 words that describe you. I'll give you a moment. Now, was one of those words confident? Today, I'd like to let you have a better grasp of these ingredients, and we'll discuss what each is, why you need it, and how do you get it. So let's explore the first one, which is confidence. What is confidence? What's your definition of confidence? Confidence embodies trustworthiness. It embodies reliability. And as Rick Smith, the previous presenter, mentioned, self-confidence, and that's a belief in yourself. Now, do you think that you need confidence as an entrepreneur or even as a public speaker? Yeah, we definitely need it. And I'd like to share a story with you. Before being a public speaker, I was in the sales market in real estate. And I had this experience when I first entered into the real estate industry. I was with a firm and I had met with a couple who wanted to purchase a home. Yeah, great. However, we had a few listings available, but I did not know anything about the listings. I did not know where they were located. I did not know their pricing. I did not know their specs. So when this couple sat before me, and they told me their story of what they were looking for. They were a newlywed, and they were looking for a home in which they could grow because their intention was to have a family. They wanted a yard. I had no idea what was available that would fit their needs. So the first step that I would like to encourage you to do as an entrepreneur or even as a speaker is to know your product.
product knowledge will give you that embodiment of confidence. Product knowledge enables you to explain or to share what you know confidently without looking through papers, because that's what I was doing. I was busily looking through papers. I did not have any time to speak with the people face to face or engage in eye contact or anything like that, because I was busy trying to match their needs and looking through the documentation that I had. So at the end of the day, they didn't really trust me because they felt I didn't even know about my product. When you're speaking with an audience, if you are looking at the slides with your back turned to them and you don't know anything about your product because you're busily reading everything, you have not internalized what your product knowledge is, then they're not going to trust you either. So the first C, be confident, you get that by having a strong product knowledge. Now, let's explore the next C. The next C is connection. Connection. How do we get connection, and what is connection all about? Well, connection is mostly attuned to relationship. I'm very big on relationships. And that blunder that I had at the real estate office, where I was not even connecting to those people because I did not form a relationship. They did not get to know me. I did not get to know them. Another instance I'd like to share with you, I went to a concert, and this gentleman got up on the stage. He was one of the opening acts. He had a good song. I listened to some of the lyrics. However, the man stood on the stage with the mic in hand. He sang, no feeling, eyes closed. Now, would you like to pay money to go and see someone perform like that? Absolutely not. He showed me that I didn't really matter. He showed me that this song is not about you or even for you. This song is all for me. His eyes were closed. There was no connection being made. Same when you are in front of an audience, and even as an entrepreneur, you have to make that connection. I also went to a networking function once, and this young lady came, and she came with her arms outstretched, shook my hand vigorously, and said, "Hey, my name is Sarah, and I'd like to meet," and she just rattled off what her product was all about and why I should buy from her immediately, and shoved her card, her business card, in my hand. I stood there, and when she was finished, she said, "So what do you do?" But she wasn't sincere. After she asked me that question, she kept looking behind me, dodging from side to side, seeing who was next that she could shove her business card in their hands, and I call it vomiting on them. Because all she did was give me all her information, not caring about me. I didn't matter to her. She did not connect with me because she had no intention of forming a relationship with me. That was the message that I got. So as a speaker, you have to engage your audience. Part of engaging your audience means making eye contact, letting them know that they matter to you. Another way is to be vulnerable in front of them. Share some stories with them. I share that story that I made that blunder with those people. Another story I'd like to share with you is also at the real estate office. I decided that we had a good thing going here. People are interested in our listings. People are interested in our product. Well, let's share it on a bigger scale. Great! My broker was all for it. And what we did was create seminars. However, I did all the legwork, and I was fine with that. I asked someone to make the presentation, and he would always make the presentation. His name is Eric. And every time Eric made the presentation, people would always gravitate to him. They would connect with him. They would sign up. Well, this one particular day, Eric couldn't make it. So he called me. Marcia, I'm stuck in traffic. Could you make the presentation? Mind you, I know the product. I wrote it. But to present it? Here it was, 6 o'clock that said evening, 50 pairs of eyes staring at me, waiting on the information. I was so nervous. I lacked the confidence. So much so, I started doing what I said don't do. Don't turn your back to the audience. Don't read from that drop down. Don't let them know that I don't know what I'm talking about. No, I did not connect. I did not engage. And when I was in front of them, turned facing them, my eyes were down. I read from a paper. I read from the paper the whole time. So I was no better than that singer who sang with his eyes closed the entire time. I made no connection. And because I made no connection, they all walked out, one by one by one. They didn't trust me. They didn't trust me because I didn't care about them. That's what I was saying to them. So what you can do is to engage in people, whether it's in the front of the room or you just met someone. Give them a nice handshake. Give them a nice smile. Connect with them. That's very, very important. So because I didn't connect, I couldn't close the sale. And what does that mean? The close. Could we get the next slide, please? Thank you. The close. This means to enter and leave with the drama. Now, the drama doesn't necessarily mean theatrics. It could implement theatrics, but on a smaller scale. By knowing your product, you have that confidence, correct? And you've made a connection by forming a relationship, correct? So this should entitle you to close the sale. Now, remember those 3 words that I asked you to write at the beginning of this presentation? As a presenter, remember, you're selling yourself. As an entrepreneur, remember, you're selling yourself. And as a salesperson, also remember that you're selling yourself. So how you present yourself, people notice. People pay attention to you before you open your mouth. Your grooming, ladies, nails, hair, gentlemen, your hair, your beards, your mustaches, your smile. Are you smiling? A smile melts almost every heart. And your greeting. Are you excited about life? When someone says, "How are you?" do you say, "Oh, I'm fine. You know, I'm okay." As Rick Smith mentioned, it's that stinking thinking. Get that out of you. Get that out of your brain. Send your brain a new message. Let your brain know, I feel great, or I feel fabulous. That's my phrase. When someone says, "How are you?" "I am fabulous." Thank you. Don't forget to thank them because they didn't have to ask you. So get excited about life. As a presenter, when you're in front of an audience, be memorable. Be excited about life. Be excited to be able to have the opportunity to have these people's attention at this particular point in time. You know how else you're memorable? Give a gift. Yes, add value to their lives. Add value to their moments. Add value to the experience that they'll have with you. Give a gift. It could be anything. A gift of a smile. A gift of a compliment. "How are you doing today, ladies and gentlemen?" And wait for them to respond. Just wait. Because if you ask them a question, you got to wait until they answer, correct? What I like to do upon meeting someone is give them a firm handshake. When I meet them for the second time, I'll give them a hug because you know why? You're not sure what that person has been going through for the entire day. And sometimes, as humans, we just need a touch. I give a hug. You may want to just give a tap on the shoulder or a nice handshake or just a smile. But gift giving, that's part of the gift giving, and that's part of being memorable. So to wrap it up, we have spoken about the 3 C's, the confidence by knowing your product. Product knowledge is essential to any entrepreneur. Product knowledge is essential to any salesperson. Know your product, because that will let you be able to speak confidently. That enables you to speak off the cuff, give a 30-second elevator pitch because you know your product inside out. That enables you to satisfy and solve whatever needs your customer asks or wants, because you know your product knowledge and you know how to tap in to those solutions. So product knowledge exudes the confidence. Next C was connection. You form that relationship. You form that relationship by making your audience, making that other person in your space in front of you, make them know that they are valuable to you. Let them know that they are important. Whatever it is that they are saying, focus on it. Focus on them. Let them know that you hear them. A lot of arguments are caused in households because people aren't heard. They're talking and they're saying things. Did you hear what I said? Isn't that usually a phrase that's coined? Did you hear what I said? Are you listening to me? Are you hearing me? So people want to be heard. That's part of the connection. Make that connection. So know your product, make that connection. And third, in order for people to know, like, and trust you, they have to have this connection to close. Be memorable. Add value. Add a compliment, a smile, a handshake, a hug. Hi, how are you? But be sincere. Please be sincere. That is also valuable. I have a couple tips for you. So those 3 words, I would like you to incorporate one of those words, and if you have to change it, please do so. Use one of those words in your greeting. So next time someone asks you, how are you? Refrain from just saying, I'm fine, I'm okay. No, refrain from that. Because you say it, you think it, you say it, and then you feel it. So if you think, I am great, and then you say it, then you start feeling great. The more you say it, the more it goes into the subliminal and the subconscious, and repetition is how we learn. The more you repeat it, the more the subconscious is tricked into believing, yeah, she's great. Yes, she's great. So whenever someone says to me as a greeting, hey, Marcia, how are you? Hi, I am fabulous, thank you. Yeah, it just rolls off the tongue now because, yeah, that's what I say. I am fabulous. So ladies and gentlemen, change your greeting. How are you? Use one of those 3 words that I asked you to write at the beginning. Next, smile. Whenever you greet someone, smile. You're in front of an audience, hello, and smile. Just smile. They'll smile back at you. Trust me. And third tip, be interested. Not necessarily interesting, interested. Because that makes you memorable. You are interested in that person. You form that connection. Then, because of your confidence and your product knowledge, you are able to tap into their needs and their problem where you can be the solution to whatever their problem is. Then you close the sale. I have a gift for you today. My gift to you, next slide please, is a 45-minute speech presentation coaching session. And it's free. It's a $150 value, and it's free from now until January 15th. So feel free to connect with me. And my connection, you can connect with me on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter at Speak2MC, and my website, marciachambers.com. And I thank you for your time today, and thank you, Global Leadership Coalition, for gifting me this opportunity. Have a fabulous day, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, thank you so much, Marcia. Confident connection and close, and I must say you definitely are fabulous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. All right, well, we're going to keep moving right along here so we can make sure that we get everybody in our wonderful program today. So the next speaker up is actually going to be me, Kristen Ellington, and I am here in New York, and I work in digital media. So I have a lot of expertise in marketing and branding and building products and launching them out into the world. What I'm going to talk to you about today is project management. Project management is really, really crucial for any person to be able to successfully launch a business. We are all entrepreneurs, we're all creatives, but we also really need to make sure that we actually get the job done. And often the way we do that is we have teams of people that we work with together. It's very difficult to be a successful entrepreneur when you're in it alone and you're doing it on your own. So today we're going to talk about some project management tips that you yourself can employ, but also that you can ensure that your team is employing to make sure when you're launching a product and getting it out there in the marketplace that you can do it in a really successful and organized way. So there's three main things we're going to be talking about today: scope, schedule, and risk. So I'm going to dive right in, and the first thing we're going to talk about is scope. So essentially what scope is management of defining and controlling. So for all of you type A's out there, you're going to love this. You're going to love this part of the presentation. So in terms of managing scope, what's truly crucial is to understand the problem from others' perspective, to understand what success looks like, not just to you, but to the other people on your team and the end users of your product. There might be multiple types of end users. There might be partners that you partner with. There might be consumers. There might be other B2B players. Perhaps there's even government involved. You want to make sure that you really understand what all of these things are, and when you sit down to start determining what your scope is. There's two main ideas of how you work to define scope. The first one is pretty obvious. It's figuring out the work that is required to complete the project. The second one, less obvious. This is figuring out the work not required for the project. It's really, really important that you stay on track. It's really, really important that you don't add a lot of other things into the project that are going to distract you. As fun and as exciting as they might be, it's really staying with the basic essentials of what you need to get done, which is understanding the problem you are solving. So you want to look at things like goals and objectives, audience expectations, how is this end product or business or service going to be used? And as we mentioned earlier, what does success look like? So in terms of the overarching way to sit down and determine scope, there's multiple steps along the way that you want to make sure that you're taking care of. And this is how you clearly and adequately define that scope. So the first thing is planning. You're creating, and you really need to write this down. Don't just have it in your head, because if it's in your head, it's not concrete and you can't share it easily with other people. So you're going to create something that we'll call a project brief. It's a written document that defines the scope. It talks about all of the things that are inputs to the project. It talks about how all of these different areas are going to be verified within the project and controlled. And then it will talk about how the project will work, and we're going to break that down in a very detailed way. When we're defining that scope, this will serve as the basis for the decisions to ensure you understand what needs to be in the project and what needs to not be in the project. So we're going to identify tasks, deliverables, critical meetings, things that should be excluded. And then we're going to talk more about what we're calling assumptions and constraints. So you may have something very specific that we need to do X. The assumptions and constraints help you define what X is by saying what X is not, by saying the box within which X lives. Those are the ways to be a really clear communicator and not just have something in your mind, but make sure that you have something that your whole team of people can understand and follow. Once you have those things figured out, what you're going to do is you're going to start to group it into various tracks of work. You're going to ensure that you can break all these pieces out. You're going to subdivide the deliverables into small, manageable components. Ultimately, what that results in is something called a work breakdown structure. Now, I'm sure most of you guys are pretty computer savvy, and hopefully you're all out there using Google Docs because they're honestly the greatest thing on the planet for a project manager. That way you can put all of your information in Google Docs, in the Word doc, and the spreadsheet doc, and you can share them with your whole team. So this part of the project, which we're calling the work breakdown structure, you're probably going to want to create a spreadsheet. You're going to want to have a different line for every single piece and every single task so you can track what those things are along the way. We'll talk more about that in a minute. The next piece is really just verifying that scope. So again, you've taken it out of your head, you've put it onto digital paper in your Word doc and your spreadsheet. You're going to verify that by sharing it with everybody else that's on your team. You might even want to have an outside expert that's just there to listen in and look and ask questions and challenge your assumptions. This is going to be sort of the formal acceptance stage if everybody's officially on your project team, where they weigh in and they say, yes, this is what the project is and we all agree and this is how we're going to move forward together. Once you have that, then you get to do your favorite thing as a project manager. You get to control the project and control what happens throughout the project, because essentially at that point you're then following the plan. Once you have your scope definition set up, you're going to step back and you're going to review with your team these basic things. You're going to talk about the process, how you're going to go about solving the work, the inputs that are necessary, and an input could look like anything. It could look like a piece of software that you're licensing from someone. It could look like a contract with a provider. Perhaps you're doing something around food or food distribution, like some of the projects we heard earlier today. Perhaps it's like the project in India where they needed to get raw materials, waste material that they could then turn into beautiful objects like purses and bags and things like that. Every project has its own inputs, and you need to figure out what the inputs are for your project. Then you're going to take everything that's learned, you're going to write it down in that scope statement, you're going to get that alignment. Then you're going to do what we call creating detailed assumptions. Detailed assumptions are, I assume that this person will be providing X at this time. I assume, or we assume as a team, that we will be able to get X percentage of this input by X date. So if we were creating purses through waste fabric material, an assumption would be that we would be able to create the deal to bring in the fabric materials that we need by X date. And then the next assumption might be that we will have a way to distribute those materials to the various people that are working on sewing and creating those projects, or perhaps taking mangoes and distributing them throughout the market. It's really important to make sure that you get all of those assumptions written down, because this is where you start to realize there might be holes, or you start to realize that you and your team members might have a different idea or a different thinking about something. And again, all of this is to assure alignment, ensuring that everyone has the same understanding of the project scope. I want you to write down your inputs and outputs very specifically. I want you to write exactly, these are just some examples of what those types of things might be. Inputs and outputs are not only things that you need for your project, but the types of things that you need to figure out along the way, the types of things that the project manager might use to manage the project. So we have a couple different categories here as examples. So we've got, on the business side, we've got the business objectives. We've got the product requirements. We've got the functional requirements, if it's a piece of software, or if it's a piece of machinery, or if it's a process that you have to set up. What are the requirements to make it function? What are the stakeholder expectations? You might want to think about who the stakeholders are in your project, and you might want to have a sample stakeholder that represents various people that are really very determined to get this project done. One of them might be an end customer. One of them might be somebody that you're working with along the way, so one of your suppliers, somebody on your project team that might be your marketing person. So you need to think about who are those key voices that you need to be checking in through the project to make sure that you're getting everything right. In terms of project management, you're going to want to have a few documents that once you determine what the scope are, that really outline day to day, week to week, month to month, what are those different pieces that you need to manage the project. So the baseline is the project as it existed as you started. We all know that projects are meant to change, right? So the baseline is where you start, and then you can manage against that from there. The project brief is that outline we discussed. The resource plan is really about people. Who are the people that you need to get things done? When do you need them, and how much time do you need of them? The schedule is taking that information and plotting it out in a calendar. The estimate is, you might have a budget for your project. Maybe you've done a little fundraising, or maybe you're doing a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo campaign. Maybe you're funding this through the people on your project team. So you want to have that budget estimate, and you want to be able to know how you're allocating that estimate. The next piece that we're going to skip over to is some of the tools that you can use to then manage the project. A scope matrix is essentially the big pieces that you've set out in your scope baseline, checking against those, making sure that you're meeting those requirements. A risk and an issue tracker we're going to talk more about in a few minutes. That's a really handy tool to plan ahead and say, okay, what if this happens, this is what we're going to do. If this other thing happens, this is what we're going to do. So you're really thinking about not only what you want to have go right, but all of the things that might go wrong and ways that you can turn those into opportunities, or at least mitigate that risk. And then the change management plan is really, okay, something changed, something came in, things didn't go as I originally planned in that baseline. Okay, now what do I do? As an example, supplier A falls through, but when you did your research, you found a couple other suppliers, so you've got a backup plan. You've got supplier B, or maybe even supplier C. So you want to be thinking about how to change what happens, and then also make sure that you communicate that out to everybody so they really understand. Another thing that I would encourage you to look up online is called a RACI matrix. It's essentially about the roles and responsibilities of the various people on the team. Outlining that up front and having that clear is very, very, very important. The most important thing is that you need well-defined requirements. You need to provide clear objectives, and you need to make sure that you mitigate any issues of ambiguity, anything that seems incomplete or inconsistent. And the output of all of this process is really the foundation for the project. It creates the schedule, it creates the budget, it gives you the framework for quality control and change control. So I'm going to quickly go through this because we've hit upon a couple of these ideas already. But what I want to really talk to you about is, how do you then do that work breakdown structure? How do you do that requirements gathering? And what are the ways of thinking that you need to have your mind in to figure this out? So the most important part of that work breakdown structure is the tasks and the items that need to be accomplished. So it's really creating a list. Again, I really encourage you to do this in Excel, and you can use that as a format to really clearly say, on this row, we've got this piece. On the next row, we've got the next piece. On the third row, we've got the third piece. It really helps you clearly define what all of those different elements are. And you can even subgroup things and even subgroup things from there. You want to do this after gathering and analyzing what those requirements are from your stakeholders. You want to figure out of all of those tasks, items, and features that must be accomplished in the project. You want to think about what is functional, what is a functional requirement, and what is a non-functional requirement. Examples are this. A functional requirement is some kind of interaction that has to happen with the product. So, for example, if you are creating a system to deliver mangoes from farmers to suppliers, there's going to need to be a way for the suppliers to find out, for the markets to find out which supplier has mangoes this week. So a functional requirement is I need to log on and see who has mangoes that are ripe and ready and available for me to pick up and bring to my store this week. A non-functional requirement is something like maybe a governmental compliance or a health and safety regulation. So in our example, the health and safety regulation might be around mangoes and when can you sell them in the market and when are they no longer good enough to sell in the market. Either they're too ripe or they've gone bad or something like that. So you want to make sure that it's not functional, it's not necessarily affecting the product and the app that you're putting in the store, but it's going to affect your overall business. We also want to think about the various components that are either product-based or project-based. So again, this is very similar. Product-based things are features and functions that characterize the product, that make that product or service really work. And then project-based considerations are all of the things that you need to do to make sure that you can deliver on that project. So maybe you need to get some regulatory certification from your local government to make sure that you can sell produce or that you can distribute in a certain market. So you want to have a list of what all of those different requirements are. Ultimately, the purpose of creating the work breakdown structure is to make sure you know what every single component is, to divide it up into groups so you can manage it, and most importantly, so you can assign those components to different people on your team, divide and conquer, and make sure that everything is getting taken care of by somebody and that 2 or 3 people aren't all attending to the same piece. The bottom line is that change is inevitable. We know that. The thing is that you will only know if change is necessary or change is important if you have a good plan in the first place. You want to make sure that you're tracking that plan. You want to make sure that you are, when a change occurs that's different from the plan, that you're assessing it, that you're making sure that you're not introducing new factors or you're bringing new things in that you don't actually need to achieve your end goal, but that you're also changing and being flexible and being agile to make sure that as you're reaching the end goal, you're focusing on the big picture and managing all the details as you go through. Just a few tips on scope management before we leave this section. Work collaboratively with your team. Each person on your team should provide a balanced look and a balanced approach to what the overall big picture looks like. If you have a technical person as well as a creative person, as well as a salesperson and a marketing person, all of those people on your team are going to bring a different perspective and a different approach, and they're all going to come up with things that can help you when you're determining the scope, when you're figuring out the project assumptions, and you're figuring out what all the tasks are that need to be done. And they're going to have different skills and abilities to then help you carry out those tasks. So work collaboratively. Don't, as detailed as I'm telling you to get, and as much as I'm telling you to think everything through, make sure that you don't noodle it to death. Make sure that you have a plan, get the plan together quickly, and that know that as change happens, you can alter the plan and adjust the plan. Socialize the plan early and often. That means making sure that you're sharing the plan as the plan changes, document those changes, socialize it again, make sure that everybody knows what's happening at all times. Make sure that you're socializing those project assumptions and that you are really documenting the expectations and the deliverables for every person. All right, the next section that we're going to talk about is scheduling. Scheduling is very, 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 very important. You want to start, when you look at a schedule and you think about a schedule, you want to start with the end date in mind. So much like the scope ends with the end expectation of what you're going to create, the schedule ends with the end expectation of what is the date by which all of this will be done. Sometimes it's really good to put some pressure on yourself and have a real world reason why you have to get something done. So that might be a launch party, or that might be a launch date that you've announced to the press, or it might be a commitment to get Maybe you're making something that's related to technology and has a mobile app that you need to get to the app store, or maybe you've got suppliers or people you're working with that you have a commitment to get something done. But at the end of the day, you want to have a date by which everything needs to get done, that you communicate to everybody and everybody is expecting for you to deliver upon. Now, quickly walk through the top level of the process of scheduling. So we've talked already about how you define tasks. We've talked already about how you define dependencies and assumptions. What we're going to talk about in this section is how you estimate those resources, estimate against all those tasks and dependencies, take those estimates, take that work breakdown structure, and then develop a schedule. The schedule will be the big picture of all of these things and all of these pieces. Once you've got your schedule created, once you've got that socialized, you, the project lead, the CEO of your venture, you get to do your favorite thing, you get to control it. All right, quickly, again, we're just going to talk about some common inputs and outputs that people have when they're creating a project schedule. So you're taking all of those things that we've created, requirements, metrics, deadlines, milestones, budget expectations, timeline expectations, dependencies, tasks. Now you're going to move into the realm of putting that into a time frame. So we want to think about things like phases and task duration. You want to have different stages in your project and make sure that you're building up to the ultimate completion. You want to know what all of the time frame is for the different tasks. You also want to build in deliverables and review points with different people. Maybe when you're creating the brand identity of your product or project or service, you want to have a point where you sit down with a little group of consultants that you've brought in to say, here's the logo that we've created, and here's the color palette, and here's how we're planning on talking about it, the voice and tone. What do you think? Let's get some input before we finalize everything. So you're really ensuring quality as you go through. These things are often buffeted by milestones. So examples of milestones in some of the projects we're talking about as examples could be, okay, we've got our marketing plan set. That's a big milestone. We've got our branding and identity set. That's a big milestone that we work towards. Now we have to create the mobile app that the suppliers and the farmers are going to use to connect with each other. That's a huge project milestone. The next thing is, okay, now we're going to actually then take it out to the community and launch it in the market. So each project will have its own milestones, but you want to really think about what those big picture milestones are, and those are typically the end goals of each of the smaller groups of tasks in your work breakdown structure. And those milestones will help you create the framework of that timeline. So say, we're going to do the creative and strategic development, and that's going to take us a month. The end of that month is going to be the first phase of our project. Then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty and get all of the requirements gathered and figure out all the different things that we need to do to create our app and to create our launch plan and to get our people up and running. All of those things need to be put into your time frame. And then the outputs really are basically those items that you put together, the project schedule that you put up with, and a way to visualize that, which could be in a Gantt form or a calendar form or something along those lines. Dependencies are the most important part of a project schedule. And what those dependencies are the relationships between all of the tasks we've been talking about. The relationships of how one thing cascades to the next, to the next, to the next. And once we have those dependencies sorted out, we can then really think about that task duration. We can really think about the phases. Was that first month long enough for that initial phase of marketing and brand identity and vision? Or do we need to now say, okay, we need to move that out to 6 months and we need to move some other things around in the project so we can still hit our final deadline. But every task leads to the next, every phase leads to the next, and everything provides a logical stepping stone that you can create your end goal. So what we want to talk about are the levels of planning. You can create a high-level plan. That's typically what you start your project with. You can create a mid-level plan, maybe within the first few weeks of your project, that's got all of the really, really detailed project scheduling and Gantt chart and calendar chart, all of those work streams, all of those key milestones really defined, and you can move forward on the project with that. A low-level plan might be something that if you have a project manager on your team and they're going to work in something like Microsoft Project or some other product that's out there on the market, like Smart Sheets or something like that, then they can create a really, really, really detailed version of that plan. But you want to think about what level of schedule you want to start out. And like I said, it's okay to start with a high plan, move into mid-level, and then move into a lower level as you progress through your project to make sure that you're managing your time properly. The last piece I want to give you just a few tips about time management, and these are really important to remember. Be detailed as possible. Be realistic while you're being detailed. Account for review cycles, account for other people, account for things maybe not working out so well. So put a little fudge time in there. Make sure you're validating with all of your resources that are working with you. Hey, this is the time frame. This is the week which I'm going to need a lot of time from you. Is that going to work for you? Are you going to be in town? Are you going to be able to free yourself up? Make sure that everybody understands the points where they're on the hot seat and they're the ones that are really supporting the overall project. Never, ever, ever, ever base your time estimates on a best case scenario. Always, always plan for, this is what we think is realistic. This is what we think is worst case, and probably go between those two. That gives you some good fudge factor and some good padding in your schedule, but never, never, never plan anything with your best case scenario. If you end up having extra time and you end up getting things done more quickly, fantastic. You're just going to have more time to prepare at the end. But most times you're going to need that wiggle room when something comes up that you need to deal with. So make sure that you're really, really thinking about worst case scenario to realistic. And really have a good understanding of how long it is going to take to complete those tasks by asking the experts. Ask a technical person about technical tasks. Ask a marketing person about creative tasks. Don't think that just because you're the CEO and the person who's leading the project that you know everything about everything. You're a generalist, but you need the experts to help you get their pieces done. Account for the unexpected, have that fudge factor, and make sure that those assumptions are weighing in on the project schedule. I bring those up over and over and over again because as human beings, we all have different working assumptions about how things are going to get executed. It's so crucial that you verbalize, that you write it down, that everybody's looking at it and everybody's vetting it from their various point of view. And the last one, which seems so simple and so obvious, but it's the easiest one to forget, think about what time of year your project is happening. Think about holidays that might be happening in your community, in your country. But also think this might be an international project, and you might need to think about what other holidays are happening, or vacations, or time off, or maybe somebody on your team is having a baby or getting married or some other big life event. Really make sure that you plan around those things and you don't get caught without having the right person that you need at the right time. All right. The final thing we're going to talk today is about risk and risk management. So project risk is an uncertain event or an uncertain condition whereby if that thing occurs, it has an effect on the project. Now, it is possible that that could be a positive effect. Maybe something comes in and you thought you were going to have to build a piece of software, but lo and behold, somebody's just going to give it to you for free and it saves you a month's worth of work. Could happen. A negative effect is probably a little bit more likely, where something that you didn't anticipate or an assumption you didn't make, or maybe something comes in out of the blue and a team member has to drop off the team. Who knows what it could be? Maybe a really bad hurricane comes through and the mango crop fails for the year. Big, big things that can happen, unintended, unperceived of risks that can happen. What you want to do is as best as you possibly can, prepare for the things that you can control, and then we'll learn how to manage the things that you can't control, like weather patterns and things like that. So in a project plan with a project manager, the way that you handle risk management is the identification, assessment, and prioritization of what those risks are. Immediately followed by coordinated with your team an economical application, which means fast, responsive, when you see the problem, immediately get on it. Mobilization of your resources in order to minimize, monitor, and control the probability and impact of what these events might have on your project. Or in this wonderful case scenario where something drops out of the blue, to maximize what the realization of those opportunities might be. That is what the point of risk management is. We're going to look really quickly at some of the common steps of the project managers take on risk management. So first of all is just planning for the risk management, determining how to execute it. The next step is identification of what those risks are. There's lots of different ways that we're going to talk about of how to identify those risks. It's, you get to put on your hat of thinking about worst case scenario and, okay, well, wow, what are the worst things that could happen, or the craziest things that can happen? It actually could be really fun to sit with your group of people and really work through, like, what are all the things that could go down that might come in and try to knock us off our game? So we want to really think about that. There's a couple of approaches you can use. Once you've figured all these risks out, you're going to analyze them. Okay, well, what are the more likely risks? What are the less likely risks? What are the risks that we can do something about? What are the risks that are out of our control? I think the bad weather or a big hurricane is a great example of a risk that maybe there's absolutely nothing you can do about that. Or maybe there is. Maybe there's something that you can think of as a backup plan where you can work with other mango providers that live on a different part of the island or the country where they don't get hit with the same storm, and so you can get a backup resource. Who knows what it is? Only you and your team will be able to figure it out and analyze what those risks are, and then organize them in a way where you understand what are the risks that you can easily control, what are the risks that are harder to control, and what are the risks that if they happen, there's a huge change to the project plan. Once you figure out what those things are, you come up with all those strategies, and then you come up with your most favorite part, which is basically creating the plan, monitoring it, and controlling it throughout the project. So just to really focus a little bit more on language and definition, it's really important to understand a risk is something that might happen in the project, and if it happens, it must be mitigated and managed. Distinct from an issue. So an issue is something that's already happened on the project, and now you have to deal with it. It's important to understand what those two things are. So a risk is something you're planning for in advance, and if it happens or doesn't happen, you have a plan in place. And an issue is something that crops up that you have to deal with in the moment. So there's a couple different ways to do that, as we mentioned. With your team, you can think through scenarios using creative brainstorming. What are all those different things? You could talk to somebody who's done this type of business before, or somebody who's a really experienced project manager. Well, what do you think? What do you think the risks are? Or you can work on objective-based scenarios. So determining what those goals are and what those outcomes might be to figure out what the positive or negative follow-up scenarios are. The next stage is really just to think through what those implications are, get them into that report, and then make sure that you're really outlining what is the likelihood, what is the potential impact, rank those things so you can track against them, and as risks are mitigated or don't even occur at all, you can then check them off your list and not have to worry about them anymore. This area of risk management is really squarely the responsibility of the project manager. This is the person on your team, whether that be you or somebody else that you delegate, that's really responsible for making sure that things are moving along, making sure that they're thinking many, many, many steps ahead, while the rest of the team is focusing on their area of expertise, marketing or technology or community development or government compliance or branding or any of the things that you might be bringing to your project. It's really, really important for a project manager to be thinking this way, to have a lot of different scenarios of how they can respond, how important an issue is, how risky, how likely it is. So the rest of the team doesn't have to think about it, and they really don't have to focus on it so much. Once they get that in place, is really control that plan, manage that plan, diagnose and mitigate those risks as they occur, and work with your team to make sure that they know that you've got everything under control. So those are the three major stages of project management that I wanted to share with you today. Create a scope, know what your scope is, be as detailed as possible, take that scope that you've socialized and gotten everyone's buy-on in, put that into a schedule that's got dates and deadlines that the resources all understand when they're on the hot seat, when they have to be performing, when they have to be available for you to get their piece of the project done, and then ensure that the project manager is really focusing on making sure that they're managing risk, dealing with things that change, because they will, assessing the schedule, assessing the impact, and moving everybody forward, having them be able to focus on what they're best at and performing at the top of their game. So thank you very much, everyone. That wraps up our skills session today. Want to see if there's any questions that anybody has, either for myself or for Marcia. I believe that Rick had to jump off the line, but if you have any questions for Rick, feel free to put those in the chat window as well, and we'll make sure that we come back to you either at the end of the day or tomorrow to answer any of those questions. So I'm just going to give a moment. If anybody has any questions, please type those into the chat window, and if not, I will hand the mic back over to Mary. Okay, great. I think we are in good shape. So thank you very much, Rick and Marcia, and I hope all of you learned a lot today, things that you can take into your businesses to make them very successful.
Thank you. Thank you, Kristen. And now we are moving, I want to say thanks to everyone, and thanks, Kristen, for handling that session so beautifully. And we look forward to receiving any comments, questions you have as we move along. Now, I would like to welcome Nadav Zemmer.
He's now unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome, Nadav. So Nadav is going to give us a little case study on education for the world that we want. And he's going to be addressing how education is addressing the why, the how, and for what we do to educate. It will provide us, in his presentation, provide us with a sample of forward thinking on why, how, and what we educate for, based on ongoing work that he's doing at the Harlem Renaissance School in New York. So, just to introduce him. Okay, so he is the principal of the Harlem Renaissance School in Central Harlem. And when he arrived at the Harlem Renaissance School in 2010, the school was listed by New York State as being persistently lowest achieving, and in need of improvement. And it was scheduled for closure. 2 years later, the school earned the top ranking and has maintained the highest score in all high-stakes evaluations. Nadav was previously a software engineer and a small business owner in California, and a physics teacher and a robotics program director in Brooklyn, New York. So welcome, Nadav. And thanks for taking the time out. I know you have a very busy day today, and it's very generous of you to be with us today and to share your experience and stimulate thinking about what we need to do to transform education. Thank you.
It's my privilege and honor to be here. So let me know when I have control.
Okay, Nadav, you should have control.
Excellent. Let's see. Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm still hearing an echo. I mean, somebody's probably not muted.
Hold on just a second, Nadav. We'll mute ourselves and then it should be good.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Oh, I just lost the screen. I can't see the screen now.
Hold on just a second,
Okay.
We just had a small issue. We'll get it right back.
Just want to make sure it wasn't just me and you all waiting for me.
Okay, do you have it?
I can see it yet, and I don't have control.
Let me give you control back.
There we go. And if you can just go full screen because I can't access the progression buttons at the bottom. There we go. Okay. So thank you, Mary, and thank you all for the opportunity to present here. It's really an honor for me. So Mary, as Mary shared, I'm the principal of a transfer school in Central Harlem. And so it's a transfer school is a school for young people who weren't successful in other schools. Some of them were incarcerated or dealt with pregnancy or drug issues, or for whatever reason, they didn't make it and weren't accumulating credits in another school. And then they came here. Some of them were just way too smart and bored at school, and they ended up here. And we helped them graduate and complete college. And so what I'm going to share with you today is a little bit about an important point we're at in education. So education, from my experience and my perspective, is at an inflection point, at a point at which there are some major assumptions in education that are being challenged. The slide is not progressing here. Give me a second. Okay. So teachers used to deliver content, right? So knowing was the same as being educated. Today, knowing doesn't have the same value because you can pull out a smartphone and look up information. So that knowledge of knowing things doesn't have the same value. In addition, we have a globalized ideas economy where knowing something one day doesn't necessarily serve you a year later or even a day later. So knowing today, my assertion is that knowing in the global marketplace is being replaced by learning, the ability to learn how to learn and to be able to adjust and respond to circumstances. And this is supported by a lot of literature in the field from Sengi at MIT, Carol Dweck, who writes about education and mindset, the work on metacognition and its value to applying what you learn to different categories of, to different areas of learning. There's also something called triple loop learning. Any of those are rich avenues to explore. Essentially, schools, I assert, will become a place where you don't come to get knowledge anymore, but you come to remove barriers to your natural ability to learn. It's a muscle that you already have and might need to be worked out and strengthened. But if you think about any toddler, every toddler learns how to learn. They learn how to walk, they learn how to speak, and they all love that exploration. And at some point, something can get in the way, and schools will become a place where those barriers are removed rather than where we add things to students when they come to school. There's an interesting point also that I've noticed, having come from the business world, that at the same time that education is moving away from knowledge and toward learning in the business community, leadership and how we train our CEOs has also become synonymous with learning. And again, there's an abundance of research on that our CEOs are now being trained as learners. And so our schools and our corporations are both heading in the same direction, saying what the future calls for is citizens who learn how to learn or are masterful at learning how to learn. And so today my goal is to give you a very specific picture of what this may look like in schools in the future. I'm not going to provide an answer or the answer. I'm providing my answer as a principal of one school. And I'm counting on all of you, if you choose to go into the field of education, to come up with your own answers as future educators. But I hope I can paint a picture of what something might look like in a practical way. And so again, my assumptions are that education is at an inflection point and that knowledge now has become obsolete in some ways. And so let's take a step back now and actually look at some of the history behind that and listen to Sugata Mitra, who was a researcher on the TED stage. He talks about the future of the education, and he starts that by addressing where education came from. Let's see if this will advance. So we'll just listen to the first few minutes of the history of education per Sugata Mitra. And I don't hear the audio from the video. I'm not hearing Sugata speak. Matt, is there something I need to do on this end?
Sorry, Nadav, we have his audio on our end.
Aha.
So I'm not sure why you're not hearing him.
Yes, I have to hear it to know when to stop him.
Okay, I'm gonna keep myself unmuted and hit play and see if that does anything. Right. Hold on just a sec. Just let me know if you can hear it.
I tried to look at
yes.
The kind of learning we do in schools, where did it come from? And you can look far back into the past, but if you look at present day schooling the way it is, it's quite easy to figure out where it came from. It came from about 300 years ago. And it came from the last and the biggest of the empires on this planet. Imagine trying to run the show, trying to run the entire planet without computers, without telephones, with data handwritten on pieces of paper and traveling by ships. What the Victorians actually did, what they did was amazing. They created a global computer made up of people. It's still with us today. It's called the bureaucratic administrative machine. In order to have that machine running, you need lots of people. They made another machine to produce those people. The school. The schools would produce the people who would then become parts of the bureaucratic administrative machine. They must be identical to each other. They must know three things. They must have good handwriting, because the data is handwritten. They must be able to read, and they must be able to do multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction in their head. They must be so identical that if you pick one up from New Zealand, ship them to Canada, and you will be instantly functional. The Victorians were great engineers. They engineered a system that was so robust that is still with us today. Continuously producing identical people for a machine that no longer exists. The empire is gone. So what are we doing with that design that produces these identical people? And what are we going to do next, if we ever are going to do anything else? So that's a pretty strong comment there. It said schools as we know them now, they're obsolete. I'm not saying they're broken. It's quite fashionable to say that the education system is broken. It's not broken. It's wonderfully constructed. It's just that you don't need it anymore. It's outdated. What's the kind of jobs that we have today? So the clerks are the computers. They're there in thousands in every office.
Okay, Matt, you can stop it.
Who buy those computers to do their very good jobs. Those people.
You said stop it, Nadav?
Yeah, go ahead and stop. It was hard for me to hear exactly where we are, but I think the main point I wanted to get was covered. And so if I can take over control again, I'll pick it up.
Sure, let me make sure you have it. Yep, you should have control.
Thank you. So it's hard, Sugata's words were muffled on my end, but I hope you could hear. And so, and I could hear the rest of the Mitra's talk of education. But essentially, the point is that our school system, there's nothing wrong with it. It's actually quite remarkable. And it was designed for a purpose, which it fulfilled on that purpose for hundreds of years in serving the global administrative machine. And I'm still hearing an echo.
Hold on, Nadav, sorry.
Great, thanks. Okay, thank you. So again, just stepping back. So I think I just wanted to frame where we came from in education and what I'm going to cover today. And now let me get started and step back and introduce myself a little more and how I got to some of the ideas that I'll present here. So just briefly, I have a very globalized family. My brother lives in Argentina. My wife is Japanese. We adopted a young girl from Japan. I was born in Israel, but my grandparents were Egyptian and spoke Arabic at home. I speak French to most of my family as a common language. My father's side was from Eastern Europe. My mom was born in the Philippines, right? So I had a sense of globalization from the impacts of World War II on my family. I also had a very diverse education from a private Waldorf school that was focused on arts. I studied in France, studied quantum chemistry in France. I studied in the US university system. I was in the international baccalaureate system. So I had a chance to see how different models of education approached engaging a young person. And it opened my eyes up that there were different approaches to education and it wasn't just assumed that education looked a certain way. And then my best education, after really being curious about education, having seen different systems, the best education I received in my entire life was a business that I was part of starting, and we were wildly successful, and then it became a massive failure. And that business school in the real world, outside of any school building, was my richest educational experience and the most engaging education I had had. And so it gave me a sense before I became an educator that true education doesn't necessarily happen in the classroom, and it had a question for me of how do we bring the type of education I got in business into the schools. And I had a moment where I experienced something and I said, why didn't they teach me this in school? And so this is what I want to talk somewhat about today. So stepping back again one more time, let's just take a look at context here. And what is education actually? Let's just clarify what our discussion is about. So I looked at Wikipedia right before creating this presentation to find an answer to that question. And Wikipedia says simply, education is the process of facilitating learning. Simple enough. So the question then becomes, what is learning? Again, to Wikipedia. So learning is the act of acquiring new or modifying and reinforcing existing knowledge, behaviors, skills, values, or preferences, and may involve synthesizing different types of information. So the question becomes, if our assertion, and Sugata Mitra's assertion effectively, if knowledge is obsolete, where does that leave us in our definition of learning from Wikipedia? And you can see that what happens is we start looking at an educational system focused on modifying and reinforcing existing behaviors, skills, and values. And I think it's brilliant that just looking at Wikipedia was my first source, we came right to this. So modifying and reinforcing existing behaviors, skills, and values or preferences. And so that really is just right there available for us where I see the future of education is going. At first, going to school was enough when we first started schools. And then we started creating standards and talking about content and what should we teach at school. And right now in the United States of America, we have new Common Core standards, and we're really talking about the how of education for the first time and talking about having students practice skills rather than just consuming content. And that's a major revolution in education. But I say it's only the very beginning of where education must go to prepare young people for the world they live in already today. And so the what is where education started. The how is what we're starting to explore with new skills-based instruction. But the why is the question that I assert is where education will be going in the, I think, very near future. But it really isn't something new. Those questions of why do we educate and what will we teach and then how will we teach it? Those have been on the minds of every educator every day since education started. It's a cycle that every educator asks themselves, why am I teaching? Given that answer, what will I teach? Given that answer, how will I teach? And that cycle goes around and around and around. And most often the why has not changed. It changes the least often. The what changes from school to school or from day to day for educators, and the how responds to that what from day to day for the educators. And we're at a time in history where the why we educate is really being questioned. As Sugata Mitra pointed out, that global bureaucratic machine is no longer answering that question effectively. And a new ideas economy is demanding a new answer to why we educate. And so this is where we come back to my moment when I said, why didn't they teach me this in high school? That answer to that is what brought me into education from the private sector, from software engineering. And it really can be captured in the values behind the school that I run, our core values. So you see our logo here, which is the monarch butterfly, right, for a school focused on young people who did not previously see school as their place, to having them come into our doors and having them leave, discovering that school is really where their heart is, and education is really who they are. That education is the core of where their passion lies. And so it's a transformation, just like the butterfly coming from the caterpillar. And the answer to the question for me of the why is inside of our values. So to rebuild is the first value, but it's really to rebuild our ability to inspire and to renew the power of our citizens. And to restore a love of learning for its own sake is the heart of what school is about. And out of all of that, for me, in this school, the outcome is that coming to school, what we provide is no longer knowledge, but it's an experience of accomplishment. So that sounds all nice, but what might it actually look like? What are the actual skills? If the why is an experience of accomplishment, said broadly, what then would the what and the how? How would we start answering those questions with this new why? And so I want to give you a very specific, detailed look at, for my school, what that looks like. So if each core value is broken up into a mountain where we're working towards mastery of these values. So the first value was rebuild relationships. The skill to rebuild relationships is authentic communication. Still a little vague. So let's go under the surface of the mountain, of the iceberg, and see what's operating under the surface that would have someone have the tools to rebuild relationships in their life and to practice the skill of authentic communication. So as an individual, what we say is that the practice as an individual is to line my private conversations to match my public conversations. And this should resonate with some of the other speakers you've heard in this conference. And then as a group member, the practice action is to respond to those around me, respond to their commitment, right? Not the words they say, but actually respond to their commitment. What are they committed to in speaking to me, rather than how are they speaking to me, what are they saying? And then on my end with them to acknowledge when I'm fronting, right? When I'm fronting is when I'm pretending something, but knowing something else is in the background, when I'm not authentic, right? So that would result in inspiration. If you imagine someone, a teacher, getting in front of a class and saying, you know, I was just angry at you for not doing your homework, but the fact is, I didn't prepare something, and that's why I got angry, right? That causes inspiration when someone comes clean and says, I've been fronting, I've been protecting something, and I've not been straight with you. And so that brings out that realm of authentic communication and rebuilds relationships. The next core value, renew workability. Right? And again, these are values in my school, the values that work in the 21st century ideas economy, values that propel young people today to success. And so climbing that iceberg of workability, the skill is to align our promises with our actions. At the mountain, you'll never stop climbing. Again, these are the things when I was in the business world that I said, why didn't anybody teach me how important these things are to get ahead? And so under that skill of the value of workability and aligning promises and actions as an individual, the practice on the court looks like completing actions in the face of fear, right? That's what courage is. I'm scared to do something and I do it anyway. I can't be courageous without having something I'm scared of. And so not being stopped by the fear, but being in action and then being in communication as things progress, as things break down. And then as a group member, making requests of my team. Those are the two pieces that make things workable, that make things functional. And if you practice them, the resulting experience for the student is one of power. The third value is to restore confidence. And the two speakers ago in talking about the 3 C's, right? It's a core value for this economy. So the skill is to challenge assumptions. If we're going to restore confidence, and let's see what that actually means. That one's a little curious. So as an individual, the practice action is to give up that there's something wrong and to generate learning in the face of frustration. So whenever something happens that seems terrible, that seems terribly wrong, that seems confronting, scary, to give up that there's anything wrong and to actually trust that this is put here for my learning. So you're generating learning when you deal with frustration. I actually share with my students frequently that the experience of frustration is actually the same as the experience of learning. And if we replace those words one with the other, there's something available for the learner that is not available for someone that defines it as frustration. And as a group member, the practice action is to give up being right and to discover multiple valid perspectives. So instead of I'm right, you're wrong, to get that we both can actually be seeing different angles of the same thing. That is how we learn. And that is how we discover a love of learning. And so the experience resulting from this value is a love of learning. And that is the core of being effective and successful. And all these pieces have to do with feedback ultimately, right? Loving learning is loving feedback. And that process of getting constant feedback, being hungry for feedback, jumping into the frustration is what has us grow and excel ahead of other candidates. It's what has us succeed at interviews. It's what has our business take off. And finally, this is the real heart and the meat of the matter, is our logo, the monarch, that butterfly. How do we constantly reinvent ourselves? There's a famous author, Coelho, who says that every day he wakes up and wonders who he's going to be that day. What a powerful way to live. So the skill is to experience a victory over the past. There's some way I used to be, but it's not, I don't say that's how I am. I get to say that's some way I used to be and look into a future that looks different than the past. For many of my students, that's assumptions about their classes. I hate math. Math is hard. Shifting to, I used to hate math. And then something new becomes possible in that moment. So being the monarch is really building the muscle of generating victories over our own past so that we can create ourselves as creators rather than living ourselves as machines. As an individual, the practice action is to own that my future is the source of my attitude, action, and interaction in the present. So if I have a bad attitude, or I'm taking ineffective action, or my interactions are not working, I have to look out into the future. And the future hasn't happened, it exists in language. So it's a creation of mine. So I look out into the future as what I've created is going to happen in the future, which is usually something from my past. But I look out into the future to see why I have an attitude now. So if I'm in math class and I have a bad attitude in math class, well, if I think I'm going to fail math class like I did the last 3 times, if I know I'm going to fail math, that's just what's going to happen is I'm going to waste all this effort and time, and no matter how hard I work, I'm going to fail. What's my attitude going to be in math class? And actually discovering that my attitude has to do with something I invented called my future, and giving up that I'm going to fail. If I don't do that, there's no chance for me to have an attitude in math class or to engage in math class and be productive. And that's true with my taxes. That's true with my relationship with my wife, right? I noticed I was having a bad attitude with my wife. And I had to ask myself, what's out there in the future? And what was out there in the future is, oh, we know each other. There's no more excitement. Nothing new is coming. This is it. We're just going to ride it out. And so I would come home from an exciting day at work and suddenly be very resigned in my interactions with her. And when I could give that up and share that with her, which was the first part, and then actually give that up, we started to have adventure again. And I look forward to coming home and discovering who my wife is. She's surprised me many, many times in the past few weeks since I noticed that future. As a group member, the practice action, so again, as an individual, is to see that my future affects my action, interaction, and attitude in the present. And as a group member, it's being present and being present. So what that means is actually showing up is the first part. If you don't show up, which a lot of my students don't, they come later, they don't come to school. So not showing up is the first part of having victories over the past. And that's hard. Just getting yourself somewhere can take something. And then when you're there, actually being present. We all shower to clean our bodies every day, but we don't all meditate to clean our minds every day. We don't have hygiene in our thoughts, and our thoughts then have us sometimes rather than us having thoughts, or I do, I know for myself. And so practicing in our schools, right, if gym classes, we could learn breathing exercises instead of just lifting weights or playing sports, which are all important. But if each student found their way, for some of them running can be their meditation, but finding a way to clean our mind, to become present in the moment. In a job interview, if you're present in that moment and you can hear the interviewer's question that they didn't even ask and respond to what they meant to ask, I guarantee you, you're going to impress the person interviewing you. But it takes being present to their commitment. It takes being with them and not being up in your head listening to the conversation about them. So being present and being present. And so that core value, which is the monarch, results in a sense of accomplishment. When we can get the future and have a victory over the past, and we can be present in the moment, this moment, the only one that's real in our lives, accomplishment is really possible. So that is what it looks like a little bit in the work that I'm doing at Harlem Renaissance. And so I'm just going to put the whole shebang up here for a second so you can see all of the core values as they exist in our school. Let's just zoom out a little bit here so you can actually see them. And then if there's time for questions, I would love to answer any questions about that. That's it. Thank you all so much.
Nadav, thank you very much. That was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Nada. Very inspiring. And now we'd like to open the floor for comments or questions.
me see.
So what we're saying that just to recap those inspiring core values relating to renewing relationships, renewing workability, restoring confidence, and just experiencing the victory over the past by being a monarch. And what does that mean for education?
Yeah, in terms of what a teacher does in the classroom, the brilliance is the circumstances of a school don't have to change. We can still teach math, and the opportunity is to confront something that's difficult and experience the victory over the past. So the content or the structure of school doesn't change, but the teacher, instead of speaking and delivering content, the teacher's role becomes one of listening, right? To remove barriers, to see barriers and remove barriers to students, to see when they have a future that's disempowering them, to give them power. So it's the same school and the same structure could work, it doesn't really matter. Where the teachers stand, rather than delivering something to take things away from students so they can discover their natural abilities, is really the shift that's happening, I believe, in the education of the next 10 years.
Excellent. Thank you. And Nadav, a question relating to how you see, you've worked over the last two years in turning your school around, and how do you see your students as they're moving out into the world carrying these values and skills?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm still in the process of implementing these values at my own school, right? So I'm not sure the students have internalized these values. Some of them have. One young man, we do a lot of video work at the school. We've made over 100 videos a year with students, and one young man was sharing that engaging in this with me, he noticed that when he was younger, he thought to be a man meant to go out on his own, and he ran away from home, and he lived by himself, and dealt drugs, frankly, and then in the school here, while he was living that way, and he was homeless at times, he realized that being a man is actually going home and being responsible for something more than himself, actually being responsible for his younger brother, being responsible for his family. His younger brother now attends school here. He graduated. But that moment, so I think what I see for these young people is they find their own answers. They answer the why, the what, and the how of education ongoingly in their lives, moving forward, and they find answers that are relevant to their own lives and their own struggles. It's not an answer that they got from us at school. And that's what I'm really proud of young people, is when they continue learning when they leave here. And learning it could be in work, it could be anywhere. And for me, the future of our culture is a shift to these values. If schools start focusing on teaching these, not these values, but teaching values, our sense of wealth changes. Wealth right now, we mean money. But wealth actually, having a family is a certain type of wealth that I see clearly for all of my students who never had parents, right? And having the ability to learn and love learning is the type of wealth that our schools can impart on young people and give them power. And so for these young people that move into the world, when I am successful, and I hope to have more and more of them really leaving practicing these ongoingly, it's having them get that there's a value for themselves of practicing these values, right? Relationships and workability, and the experiences coming out of it, that's really a value, like that's the type of wealth, having experience of accomplishment. And if you've ever spoken to a very wealthy person, they actually, finding accomplishment is worth much more to them than any amount of money, right? Or power or inspiration. These are the reasons a lot of people come to get money, but you can actually go right to the source and generate inspiration or power or love of learning or accomplishment. So that's what I hope to see more and more students going into the world and doing, and being what some people refer to as lifelong learners, but specifically answering their own questions.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, we have another question, and that is, how can teaching make this shift in education, teachers make this shift in education in their own schools?
That's a great question. So it starts, the only way to really teach this is to practice it yourself. You can't tell someone else to love learning, but if you have a love of learning, you can model it and then it quickly, so if we stop in schools talking about you and delivering anything, but teachers become vulnerable and reflective. And so there are many programs and many structures, including this one, that just practicing these as an individual will bring them into the classroom in an organic, very natural way. So it's an organic process. And for myself, if you're committed to the transformation of education, my feeling is you have to commit to one community, one building for 20 years or so. You have to come together with a community of people that can support you in learning and bringing these and growing these seeds together. You can't be in and out. And so if you have a commitment and bring this up as a conversation, and you have a community of people that's willing to stay together to discover this, you will discover this and you will grow this, and it will bear fruit.
Excellent, thank you. I have a question myself. The gentleman whose name I forget that you presented in the TED Talk also talked, he talked about the obsolescence of knowledge, right? And you talked about the behavioral aspects, but he also talked about the way that we are being trained or right now also being obsolete. And so my question for you is, what other innovations are you introducing apart from the behavioral ones that you have described?
Yeah, brilliant. So Sugata Mitra in his talk, if you watch that TED Talk and you look at the related links, other videos always come up that are similar. That's an exploration that can lead you some beautiful answers to the question you're asking from people who are much smarter than I. Sugata talks about self-organized learning environments, or souls. And he talks about how to start a soul in your own living room. And you can start a soul just from his TED Talk. So I encourage you to experience those. For me, at Harlem Renaissance, my belief is that every teacher should have one art form that they hold and that they teach through. So we have a lot of video. We have a new $600,000 recording studio so we can create podcasts. But it could be clay. It could be painting. It could be essays, right? It could be poetry. It could be theater. But each teacher has one art form through which they engage in their content. And so then they deliver, or actually there's something called Columbia University, I can't think of the name, another brilliant TED Talk of a gentleman who's teaching science, Science Genius it's called. The Science Genius program teaches science through hip hop. So students learn scientific concepts and then write lyrics and then compete against each other with their lyrics about science. So I feel, for me, I think that one of the exciting ways to engage in practicing these core values and putting them on the court is to create a court. And that court is usually some type of art form or accomplishment or deliverable where you're in front of an audience at the end and you have you have something you have to deliver and people are going to be seeing it. I think that creates some kind of court for you to play on, where then you get to experience these the frustration, right, and the fronting and completing actions in the face of fear and all those things. You need some structure within which those will have to show up, and you'll have to push through them. So that's what I'm looking to do with my teachers, have each one of them take one art form, podcasting or plays, and then have students deliver a product around that. And through that process, coach them using these core values.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, while we're waiting for other questions to come up, I want to go back to the morning talk where we actually talked about the world that we want, and the world where we can resolve differences. And okay, it's coming up. I'll finish. We have another question. I'll finish this one. And so, how do you see this? As you know, we're looking at a world and a context where there are a lot of inequalities, where there's a lot of disaffection, and there is this gives rise to conflicts and also that inability to resolve conflicts. How do you see the approach that you're taking actually molding our young people to transform the way in which our world is operating?
Yeah, and that's something that we have been wildly successful here. Our dean, Mr. Earl Gray, is brilliant. And students come to our school and they're usually gang involved and used to conflict and violence. And we don't have any violence here in the building. And it takes them a month or two to get used to that. We use something called restorative justice circles. It's a Native American practice where you sit in a circle and there's a centerpiece to rest your eyes on, and we pass the talking piece around. And as long as students are sober, I find it doesn't work very well when they're high, but as long as students are sober, engaging in that process of listening, because in a circle, no one is more important than anyone else. And the person with the talking piece is the only one that's speaking, but that leaves everybody else to participate in an active listening process. And that process of being listened to, and then mostly listening to, and we usually start by talking about our values. And you see that the person you're in conflict with has the same values as you. And so again, it's in practicing these core values, and that's a lot in the realm of rebuilding relationship and learning how to align my private conversations to match my public conversations. That could mean my gossip to have and find the person who I'm talking about and have a conversation with them directly, or the internal conversations in my head and be able to share with them directly. That turns conflict and violence into inspiration. When you resolve conflict, there's an experience of inspiration. And so that practice, that skill of authentic communication and using protocols like restorative justice circles gives a really powerful muscle, right? Skills are like going to the gym. You have to practice a skill and you build the muscle. But as students learn to communicate in an authentic way, where they're real, young people really respond to when you're being real, when you keep it real. When a teacher is fake, the students won't do anything for them. When the teacher is real, the students will do anything for them, including put aside a conflict. So again, these practices, and in particular the rebuild relationship core value and related skills and practice actions, I think really give access to something where a student who comes from a past of violence can actually have a victory over that past and create a future of authentic communication.
Excellent, thank you. So that's really, thank you for giving that illustration of a really useful way of moving from the core value into practical application in issues that come up in our lives. Thank you. We have a question.
Yeah, we had a question come through. It said, can you give a specific example of a student's transformation at your school?
Oh, wow, so many. So the one that was the most stark was one young man who, who I struggled with a lot for a long time. He refused to care about the community. He refused to follow the rules. He was really nasty. And, we brought him in and we made no difference. And I would meet with, I have a team that just looks at the most troubled students, and we would meet and talk about, he would always come up at that meeting, and he was disruptive and nasty and angry. And then we sent him, I worked my entire career when I ran the robotics program when I was a teacher under a principal at a career and technical ed school. And so we have a partnership with that school now, and we send students there they do a half a day of academics here and a half a day there where they explore a skill. And he discovered welding. And in that moment, I remember the first day he went to welding class and came back, and he was so polite and so sweet and so engaged and so motivated. And I just said, what happened? And he just saw a future for himself. For the first time, he saw himself as a welder, and he knew that's who he was going to be. And just having that future out there, right, that is what gave him the experience, the interactions in the present. Until then, all he saw is who his brother was, who his father was, and they were all in jail. And so the future he saw is that there's nothing I can do. The culture I come from, how I've been raised, and what I've been trained is going to land me in jail, and I can't do anything about it. And you can see that how he interacted with us at the school was just that. He kept getting in trouble, right? And we sometimes, we're thinking that jail might be a good idea for him to wake him up. So he was literally pulling jail toward him because that's what he saw his future was, until the moment where he replaced that and saw himself as a welder, and everything changed.
Excellent, thank you.
That's it.
All right, that's really inspiring. I mean, when I think of that, and I think of the discussion that we had this morning, where there was a challenge for not only looking at the problem and identifying the problem, but actually taking the action to operationalize, whatever it is that we consider to be the solution, and where there is a policy framework that enables that. So this is a wonderful illustration of what can happen on the court. So thank you for that. No more questions? Okay, so I have a final question for you, Nadav. What would you recommend or let's put it this way. How are you interacting with the Department of Education? And what would you recommend to them for transforming education?
Yeah.
I get it that this is a specific example and it has had great results, but what would you recommend given the type of results that you are getting? Sorry.
It's a great question. And the Department of Education, a lot of my colleagues, it's a really rough environment to work in many ways, and everybody has good intentions. A lot of my colleagues, most principals don't last more than 3.5 years. And there's good reason for that. And they're talking about the draconian system and having mandates to things that they don't fund and all of these complaints. And so my feeling is the Department of Education is not who we should talk to. Usually we talk about scalability and how do we take a model and apply it elsewhere. I don't think that that's where we look to grow this. I think it's a much more, this type of transformation in education is going to be a disruptive one. And like all disruptive technology, like what we've seen in the internet, what we've seen with crowdsourcing, the way Uber has taken over taxis, these things we didn't go to the taxi industry and say, let's design something for the app economy that would work. There's something that had to come and disrupt. And so what I say, and my experience that I could share inside of a school is when you build a community at the local level and you practice this and you rebuild relationships and you cause inspiration and you give power and people have a love of learning. And really, underneath all of it, there's trust, right? If there's a community where there's trust present. The beautiful thing about the Department of Education is that it's a bunch of human beings that make up the department. There's nothing actually there. If the Department of Education isn't anything, there are buildings and human beings. So if you actually interact with those human beings, when they walk into a building that has those things present, they recognize it and they back off. And a lot of my colleague principals said, how do you get away with so much? How do they allow you to do all these things and you take these great risks? How do they let you do it? They seem to trust you, but nobody trusts anybody in the DOE. And my answer is, if at the local level you build trust, at the grassroots level, you plant a seed and something grows, and even something as arcane and draconian as the Department of Education will walk in and recognize that, and then trust goes up from the roots. Trust doesn't come from the Department of Education down. So my answer is, as many schools as possible have to steal everything that I've made, steal it, take it, and then make it your own and show me how you improved it, and let's each day work together in each school to bring these values to life, one interaction at a time, and it never gets easy. It's never easy to communicate authentically. It's never easy to challenge our assumptions about each other. But practicing that in schools creates something that even the human beings that run the Department of Education will recognize, and they will walk in and recognize it, and they will help you get funding, and they will back off of audits, and they'll give you space because they don't know how you do it, and they don't even trust that it's stable. They think it's a random accident, and so they don't want to touch it. They want to let it run as much as possible, and so they'll back off and give you space. And then within that bubble of that school, without the department intervening at all, you can create some magic. And the more of those bubbles we have, that's, I think, how we're going to get to a Department of Education that's transformed.
Excellent, thank you. So given that, I like that. I like that encouragement to take the initiative to be innovative. And so, I mean, this is really brilliant because that's being entrepreneurial, and that's part of our commitment. So one of the things that occurs to me as you talk about this is whether you have had any kind of exchange conversations with schools outside of the United States. There are many countries that are grappling with, shaping their young people. And so my question for you is whether you have had discussions, any exchanges with schools outside of the United States, and if so, what, where was that, and what was the
Yeah.
result?
So very little interaction inside the United States or outside the United States. I think my model here is very young, and like I said, I haven't even fully implemented the core values here. They're not. My staff hasn't even fully bought into them. We have it in pockets, and we've been trying things out. And I have some conversations. I had conversations with a group of Israeli principals many years back, and so I always relish and look forward to the opportunity to connect. And I think that we're at the beginning of something that's about to spark. So no, I think in gross, no, my answer is no. And I think it's about like we're right there. This is what I'm doing here. I trust is happening in a bunch of different places in a bunch of very different and very similar ways. And I think we're bound to discover each other quickly, but we haven't yet. Let me just share one other thing that really stuck with me. Tony Zampella, who I had recommended to be one of the speakers here, and he chose not to in the end, said something about education that has stuck with me ever since. And if you're interested in engaging in education, I think it's a great kind of kohan to think about. He said that in the United States in particular, we're always looking at measuring. If we're educators, the analogy is to be corn farmers. Imagine we're corn farmers, right? And in education, we're growing corn. And everybody wants to measure how tall the corn is. And everybody wants to measure how sweet and how yellow the corn is. And so everybody's measuring the corn. But if you talk to a farmer, the farmer will reach into the soil and take a handful of soil and to feel the conditions of the soil to know how the state of the farming is going. And in education, everybody's so obsessed with measuring the product that we're not putting our hands in the soil to measure the conditions in which we're growing our students, right? Our human beings. And those conditions, the way you reach into the soil in education and feel the conditions is to get what it's like to be a student and what's going on in their minds, what education looks like to them. Until you can deal with a student in a math class who thinks that math is hard, and until you can actually create the possibility of them conquering math and what that would be like for them, unless you're talking about those conditions, right, that mindset that the student's operating in, you're never going to improve education. So I would say that any school that's looking at the conditions of education being the way schooling occurs to the students, they're all doing the same work that I'm doing, no matter how different the work actually looks.
Excellent, thank you.
And there was one other thing. It was not necessarily a question, but just something that you might want to speak to. Trevon Pollard said, I just wanted to say that teaching method or style chosen by the teacher should not only be influenced by the strength of that person, but by its impactfulness on the students. And I just wanted to see if you wanted to say anything about that.
Yes, I'm not sure I fully understand, but I think that the same way that I interact with my teachers, I want to model what I want them to do for the students. So it's really about discovering a teacher's natural abilities, not telling a teacher how to do something, right? Bringing out their natural ability to connect. But the point is that the old model, teachers were trying to get students to think like them. In the future, teachers are going to be curious to understand how the students are thinking. So learning isn't going from the teacher to the student. Learning is going from the student to the teacher, so the teacher can get inside of the student's world, right? That's that hand in the soil. And so I think that if that's what we're talking about in terms of outcomes, how effectively does a teacher get into the student's world, then I think that statement is absolutely right. They need to find their own talent and their own style and their own voice to engage a young person and discover that young person's thought process, and have the young person make their thinking visible to them. And as long as that's what's happening, that's what we're talking about in terms of the outcomes, then I would say, yes, that's accurate.
Excellent, thank you. Actually, that sparks another question on my side while we're waiting for another question. I think we can take one more. I'd love to hear from some of the young people who are participating. And so that question comes to the parents. You know, we talked this morning about the community involvement. And so your school has this approach and there are certain results that you're getting. How do you interact with the parents and how do they play a role in shaping the values the core values that you are promoting?
It's a great question. My population in general, being that the students are older, they're all closer to 21, and the parents for the most part have gotten frustrated. We don't have many, we don't usually, actually, right now, as we speak, we're in the middle of parent-teacher conferences here at the school. So that's happening outside my door. I'm seeing parents walk in front of my door as I'm speaking to you. And we're starting to have something happen with the parents, but it really is the same thing, I think, as for the students and the teachers. It's as a community engaging in these values. And I think that when parents come to a place and have, you know, renew workability, they've been in many schools that are not workable. And so if you're aligning promises and actions and you're making requests of the parents, and then on your side, you're completing the actions that you promised, and you're in communication with them, I think that that is access to an experience of power for the parents, which most of them have lost working with their teenagers. They feel a sense of hopelessness with the teenager. And so we can use these same core values with them. And if we want a parent to experience power, we use these same practiced actions with them. And then I think that that workability between the school and the parent has the potential to develop something. And again, I wouldn't claim any success here. I've had very limited success with parents, but I do have a small group of parents who are absolutely, it's made an impact on, and who are absolutely on board and who are so inspiring. So this is in early young stages, but I think it's the same answer. You go back to the core values, you see which one resonates. In this case, I think renew workability would make a lot of difference. And you intentionally, as a community, hold each other accountable to make requests of the parents, and then to complete our actions in the face of our fears with them and be in communication with them, even when we might not want to.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you very, very much, Nada, for a very stimulating presentation and for the great work that you're doing. And we definitely will stay in touch because this is, you know, groundbreaking work, and this is what we want to see, the innovation as we look to see what can be done to transform education, but have education play a role in shaping the type of world that we want. So thank you very much.
Thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to seeing this all over the place, seeing variations of the same work around me.
Excellent. Thanks for being a trailblazer. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so everyone, is 1:48 right now, and so we are coming to the end of our session for today. I think you would agree with me that we've had a very stimulating day, starting off with setting the framework and just having an examination and an inquiry into what it would take to have a world that we want, to have young leaders operating in a world that we want, promoting peaceful interaction, tolerance, and commitment to a sustainable future. And we looked at the fundamentals there and what it would take to have transformative approaches to the way in which our leaders are developed and take actions at a systemic level. And we also had some very inspiring sharing from entrepreneurs, young people who are being entrepreneurial, and they shared the projects that they have been engaged in, that they envisioned under the whole vision of creating not only young people who are entrepreneurial, but addressing the problem of creating jobs and engaging young people in taking actions that would make a difference in their communities. And we also had inspiring presentations, skill building presentations that really actually turned out to be quite interrelated, bringing together issues such as confidence and connecting, relatedness, So there's some key themes that I see that have really emerged from the day in terms of relatedness, connectedness, really looking at what it is that we want to do and being able to manage that, having confidence. Confidence was a theme that came right across all of the work that we've done today. And yeah, so, sorry. So we've had an inspiring day. We see that for me, what I take away from today is that there are opportunities. There's a lot of innovation out there. What I would like the participants to think about overnight, I come back tomorrow, ready to interact, is based on what they've heard, what are the types of innovations that might be applicable in their own communities, and how could they see themselves taking a role to initiate some of the actions that might be required in their communities. One of the things I would like to leave you with is to listen. What I call it is leap. Listen. Listen not only in the context of this conference, but listen in our environments. Listen for what's there and for what's missing. Engage. Engage not only here, but engage with what's happening in our community, in the context that we have described, where there is a youth bulge, where there is an opportunity for youth to take action and to take action now, where there is an opportunity to engage not only with your community, but to have an awareness of what's obtaining in other communities, because there is inequality globally, there's inequality at the national level, there's inequality at the community level, and there are opportunities for us to engage around that, bring in our own skills to bring about the type of transformation and the accommodation that we would like to see in this world. The A in leaping, taking action, being active. So being actively aware and looking for opportunities to be innovative. And then the P. The P in taking that leap is participating. So from listening, from engaging, from being active to actually participating. So I'd like to take that leap and to challenge you to take that leap as we move forward into day 2 of the conference. Reflect overnight on what we have been able to deliberate on today. Come back with any further questions or suggestions or recommendations that you may have, and bring that leap into our deliberations tomorrow. Thank you all the presenters today. Thank you all the participants, and I encourage you to bring your friends tomorrow as we continue in this engagement. Thank you. We'll see you at 10 tomorrow, New York time, and we know that that's different times in different parts of the world. Thank you.